11:05 p.m. When it rains, it pours. The endless farmland where I live is dry as a bone until it isn't, and then storms roll through and everything breaks loose. Storms are big enough to wash away cattle, the kind where tornadoes rip at the earth like fingers of an angry god. Tonight, I am taking shelter in my dead husband's childhood home, sitting by the chimney with my 2-year-old son, what remains of a fire flickering in and out as wind funnels down the chimney. I hear my dead mother's voice in my head. She speaks in her classic, "I told you so" tone, undercutting the sound of a not-so-distant thunder. "Should have stayed in the city like I told you, Tess. It's your own fault. You chose to run away with that crappy excuse for a husband." The old witch had always hated Johnny. I'm realizing that apparently her ghost hates him just as much. Her ghost has no sympathy for the fact that I'm recently widowed, that Johnny got killed in a hit and run 2 days back. Now I have nobody else but John Jr. JJ has glasses, the Coke bottle kind. He's farsighted. Up close, he's blind without them. JJ is a late bloomer. When we could afford it, he went to a gross motor specialist in the city. At a little over 2, he can barely walk, though the glasses help. And he's sensitive. The kind of kid who, God willing, will grow up and make the world a better place because he actually gives a crap. But when you're so young that emotions run high and words fail you, sensitivity is its own sort of thunderstorm. Terrible 2 tantrums make supercell storms look like small potatoes. A supercell storm, 6 hours of severe weather, and we'll be here all night, maybe forever if the house collapses. I scrub the bad thoughts from my mind. I shush JJ, telling him that it's okay, that Mama's here to protect him. But doubt creeps back up, like water in a swollen river. Johnny and his family, they know how to weather storms. They were from here. Not me. I'm a city girl who got stuck in the country, and now I'm up to my eyes in trouble. The chimney where JJ and I are sitting, it was the source of so many comforting nights together with Johnny's family before his mom and dad had died. When Johnny's brother finally landed in the state penitentiary for good, Johnny came home, me with him, to run the family business. We had huddled near the hearth on nights like these, tornadoes on their way, praying that we would never have to bother with the storm cellar out by the barn, and we never did. The hearth was sacred to Johnny's family. They had found comfort in it for as long as they had been here. But I should have left because it's Johnny's hearth, Johnny's family's chimney. Johnny's family's a crackling fire, not mine. And now I'm stuck here with my mother's ghost, reminding me of my numerous shortcomings. "Stupid," she says. "You're a city girl, not a country bumpkin. Not a rube like Johnny and his good-for-nothing family." I search for words to argue with my mother's ghost, but I come up short. And then a powerful gust of wind comes down the chimney, and the fire goes out completely. Life recently, it's been defined by coming up short. Hirsch Hickson, the county sheriff, old Bill Wallace, our neighbor from down the road, they told me to prepare for the storm on the horizon. They saw that our family had come up short, and they had wanted to help, but I didn't listen. Hirsch said that he would come for JJ and me if things got bad. I hope he doesn't. I can't have his death on my conscience, too. As my mother's ghost stares at me from near the chimney and the charred remains of a fire, the memory of everything that happened in the last few days threatens to send me to the brink. I look at JJ. He's not crying at the moment, but the storm isn't even halfway here. This is the first storm that I'll have to weather on my own, and truth be told, I'm scared out of my mind. I'm scared that I'll fail JJ and that both of us will die. I'll have had 28 decent years on this earth, a good run. But JJ doesn't deserve to die after 2, punished for his mom's mistakes. Life can just be real like that. When it rains, it pours. 11:35 p.m. Close to midnight now. JJ whimpers. I shush him, telling him that it'll be okay and hating myself for lying. Thinking back, dang it, how many storm warnings were there? And I don't mean the kind on the Weather Channel. I mean the things that have happened recently. Portents of trouble coming down the road. Johnny getting called back home in the first place 2 years ago. We were living in the city above our means but happy. And then he was called back to take over the family business. That crap hole laundromat on Main. And when he left for his deployment all those years ago, he made a promise to himself that he would never come back. He knew that nothing good could come from being near his brother or the people that they had grown up with. But our finances were going down the tube, right along with Johnny's parents' health. So he came home. After a year, his parents had died. The family business had continued to fail. And then almost a week back, 10 dead at a pharmacy in a neighboring town. 1 Oxycontin-addicted robber, 5 shoppers, a sheriff's deputy, and 3 people working in the back. The ones who had been held up for the drugs and the money. The shootout had been so violent that the papers had only included a small write-up about it. No pictures at all. The night of the robbery, Johnny came home white as a sheet. Karma, my mother's ghost says from her place near the fireplace. You're an idiot for ever believing that Johnny was more than a 2-bit criminal. He got what he deserved, getting hit by that. Shut up! JJ looks up at me, tears in his eyes. Oh, I wasn't talking to you, baby. I say to him, My assurances are cut off by JJ's sudden wail, more than matched by the screaming wind outside. Maybe my mom was right about Johnny, about him being nothing more than a criminal. Past his kindness, past his gentleness, there was severity. Johnny had served in Afghanistan. The military had turned him into a killer. His soul was scarred by what he saw over there. But was killing in his nature. His brother had been a thief but not a killer. Was there something to it? Something dark running through Johnny's family. They had been revered in town. It didn't match up. His mom had been so. A bout of hail pounding on the roof could be heard. Golf ball size or bigger, it startled me from my thoughts. JJ's screaming intensifies. This time, it's Johnny's voice in my head, not my mother's. Remember what I taught you, Tess, he says. About survival, about fighting back, about storms. I remember one day last fall almost a year ago before things fell completely apart. No lessons about storms, just survival. Johnny taught me how to shoot. I hated guns, hated the way they looked, and hated the way that they smelled. But I saw trouble in Johnny's eyes and knew that if nothing else, taking the shooting lesson seriously would put him at ease. The trouble in his eyes. Had he known about some impending trouble that he hadn't told me about? Water and canned food in the cellar if you need it, Johnny says. Battery-powered radio and a flashlight in the kitchen. First aid kit under the sink. Formula for the baby. Screw formula. Johnny and I had been trying to wean JJ for months, but that was before Johnny had died and the storm showed up on my doorstep. If breastfeeding stops the crying, even for a second. Remember what I taught you about survival, Tess, Johnny repeats. The storm cellar near the barn. It's your Alamo. If you can't get there, go to the bathtub. Not the one against the outside wall in our bedroom. I mean the one that butts up against the garage, near JJ's nursery. The sound of another bout of hail cuts off Johnny's warning. My mother's voice again. Should have left, you stupid girl. Should have left when you had the chance. JJ's crying, the storm outside. My eardrums are on the verge of bleeding. Hail on the rooftop. Or is it someone pounding on the front door? 11:55 p.m. 5 till midnight. 5 minutes until the witching hour, when devils come out to play. I open the front door to see who's pounding on it, and two strangers are standing on the stoop, their dark silhouettes outlined by bulbs of lightning popping in the distance. The sky is electric green. More hail is on the way. I can barely hear these strangers' words over the wind. Got stuck. Need a little help. Lightning, too close for comfort, ignites their faces. Two men. Knowing that they're dead otherwise, I let them inside. One stumbles on his way through the door, catching himself against the opposite wall near the kitchen counter. The other pushes me and JJ back, closing the door behind him. He slides the deadbolt into place. The one who locked the front door stays near it. The other stumbles away from the wall and drops into Johnny's father's favorite recliner. Both of the men are soaked to the bone. Thank God for you, says the man. We were effed out there. I want to cover JJ's ears. Johnny and I let curses fly, but the words sound different, coming out of this man's mouth. They sound like venom. Is he hungry? Asks the man in the recliner. He stares at my chest with emotionless eyes. I won't peek, I promise. I shake my head. Instead of feeding JJ, I ask a question that's been on my mind ever since they came through the front door. What were you doing out there? You could have died. The man behind me near the door clears his throat, but it's the man in the recliner who speaks. We're on a treasure hunt, he says. A what? A treasure hunt. He smiles at JJ. You like games, kiddo? I shield JJ with my body. Oh, is he mute or something? Asks the man. He's 2 years old, I say. He can't speak yet. The man laughs, and then he bends around me to look at the man by the door. God, Troy, I could speak by then, couldn't you? You might consider taking the boy to the city. See if you can get him some help. I'm not fooled by him. There's something unsettling about this man. Something in his eyes. He's a wild card. He may as well have ridden in on a lightning bolt. His hair is messy from the wind, but I get the feeling that he looks that way even on a good day. This man is unstable, unsteady. In the few minutes that I've known him, I discern that this man is severely unwell. Hurry up, Carl, says the man near the door. His name is Troy. I turn to look at him, whereas Carl is wiry, rat-like, and crazed, like he had escaped a mental hospital. Troy is big and steady on his feet. He looks like a pillar of stone. His face is chiseled and he's 6'4" at least. I run away from Troy's unfeeling gaze and back to Carl. In the time since I've taken my eyes off him, Carl has pulled out a pistol from under his jacket. It's laying on his lap, the barrel pointed in JJ's in my direction. I hear the voice of my dead mother from somewhere in the kitchen. Should have left, you stupid girl. Should have left when you had a chance. I hear Johnny's voice too. I wish I would have told you, Tess. I hear Carl's voice, but it's preceded by a deranged chuckle. Sorry about your husband, he says. I ain't too good behind the wheel. What did you do? I ask. Killed his sorry butt, says Carl. He took something that belonged to me. My worst fear is realized. The night that Johnny came home white as a sheet, my suspicions were right. The pharmacy where 10 people were butchered in cold blood, 9 innocent, 1 guilty. Johnny was there. He was there because we were down on our luck, and he was rolling the dice, trusting people that he shouldn't have. People like his brother, like the people he had grown up with, the ones that he swore to himself he would never be around again. But Johnny, I knew him. He wasn't evil, just down on his luck. Maybe I didn't know him at all. I wish I had told you, Tess, I hear Johnny say. We'll be on our way, Carl interrupts. Just give us the cash. JJ lets out another sob. His glasses are smudged with tears and snot. I shush him and tell him that everything will be okay. But I know they won't be. And on cue, the wind picks up outside. Twisters are on their way. The wind doesn't howl like that unless tornadoes are forming. I told you it's okay to feed him, says Carl. I promise I won't watch. Give that baby some milk. You and I can talk about what your dead husband stole from us. My stomach churns. I don't lower my shirt, even though I want to. Even though I want JJ to know that mommy's here for him. But I do sit down, nudged forward by Troy. Carl notices that I tensed up at Troy's touch. Don't worry, he says. Troy doesn't bite unless I tell him to. I remember something that I learned once, in a movie maybe. Criminals who plan to let you off don't say their names. Carl and Troy don't care that we know their names, because JJ and I aren't leaving. Out of the corner of my eye through the windows, I see a series of flashes, followed closely by booming thunderclaps. The storm is with us now, another stranger making its way inside the house. Carl reaches forward and touches my breast with his slender, radish hand. Feed your baby, he says. We can hunker up all night if we need to. 12:25 a.m. I feed JJ as Carl watches. Troy tosses drawers in the kitchen, looking for whatever it is that Johnny took from them. Carl pulls a pack of Marlboro Reds out of his jacket and lights one up. He blows the smoke at JJ and me. JJ stirs. He's fallen asleep on my chest. I wish JJ was awake, that he could help me, that he could fend for himself. I don't know where the money that Carl and Troy wants is, and I can't protect us. Surely not with JJ sleeping on my chest. The bathroom, Johnny's ghost says. I can hear his voice clearly over the wind. His ghost reaches out from behind the grave to remind me of lessons about survival. The pieces of the puzzle assemble themselves. I realize that Johnny was a criminal all along. The shooting lesson last fall, other lessons that he had imparted throughout our marriage. He shared his soldier's knowledge in case something like this happened, so I could fight back if he wasn't there to protect me. The bathroom, Johnny says again. Back of the toilet tank, the gun, it's loaded just like I showed you. You should be in there anyway, Tess. It's too late to make it for the cellar. Johnny's voice blows away. My focus shifts. I see my dead mother standing behind Carl. She stares at me disapprovingly. Her skin is bloated, blue, waterlogged, just like it was on the night that I found her drowned in her favorite claw-footed bathtub, overdosed on benzos and booze. Oh, spare me your judgment, Tess, she says. You think I was weak. Take a look in the mirror. You were too stupid to leave, and you're too cowardly to fight back. These men are here to kill you and JJ, and there isn't a thing that you can do about it. Carl's crazed, piercing eyes break my concentration. It's like he's trying to read my mind. He follows my stare toward where I saw my dead mother's ghost standing behind him. Troy, he says, that picture frame on the wall. She looked right at it. Troy makes his way over from the kitchen. His foot falls like thunder. He removes the picture frame, revealing a discolored spot on the wall. He taps the wall with his gun barrel, searching for a stud but he doesn't find one, and then he punches through the drywall. He searched around in the cavity behind it. I pray that he doesn't find anything, because if he does, JJ and I are dead. Nothing, says Troy. I see a flash of movement. A wave of Carl's cigarette-reeking breath hits my face. He grabs JJ's arm and pulls it towards him. I hear JJ's elbow crack. Carl moves his smoldering marble near JJ's unblemished skin. JJ wails. I scream in terror. "I'll kill this runt," says Carl. "Mark my words. I'll give him a brand. Now tell me where the money is." Instead of putting the cigarette out on JJ, he grabs my arm and puts it out on me. The pain is extraordinary, focused, a strike of lightning on my flesh. I grit my teeth, holding JJ. I can't pull free from Carl's grip. I can't move, so I grit my teeth until the cigarette goes out. Carl takes a deep breath. What's left of his frayed sanity returns for a moment. He drops the extinguished cigarette and runs his hands through his greasy hair, slicking it back. "No one needs to die," he says. "Dang it, we could all be eating canned beans right now, huddled up around a lantern telling ghost stories. No one needs to die." Outside, the wind howls. A fresh bout of hail hits the roof. I imagine tornadoes on that haunting electric horizon, and they're coming straight for us. No one needs to die, but if Carl and Troy don't start killing people, it's just a matter of time until the storm does. The storm cellar by the barn may as well be 1,000 miles away. "The bathroom," I say. "I'll show you." 12:45 a.m. I stand up to lead the way, but Carl stops me. "We'll take that baby off your hands," he says. "Gotta start picking up the pace here. Don't want you over-encumbered." He mispronounces the word. It fumbles awkwardly past his smoke-stained teeth. Troy rips JJ away from me before I can stop him. "No," I beg, tears flooding out. "Please." JJ cries bloody murder, but Troy holds him like a natural, like he's a father with children of his own. He shushes JJ, rocks him. JJ keeps crying, but the brutality of it subsides. "I told ya," Carl says. "Troy doesn't bite unless I tell him to." Troy stares at Carl with something resembling hatred. Troy bites who he wants when he wants. He would bite Carl if biting was required. I would pay any amount of money to avoid being on the other end of his teeth, but I don't know where the money is. In the front yard, out of the corner of my eye, I see a bolt of lightning hit a tree. It explodes in flames. "Ah, screw me," yells Carl. Troy reaches out with his free hand and shoves me forward. I sprawl onto the floor. Splinters grind into my palms. "Get the money now," Troy warns. "I'm done waiting." I stand up, refusing to let myself look at JJ, knowing that I would crumble if I did. I make my way through the dark hallway deeper into the house toward the bathroom, away from the safety of the hearth. Johnny's ghost comes with me, and so does my mother's. "Should have left, you stupid girl," says my mom, vomit spilling from her ice blue lips. "Should have left when you had a chance." "Eyes forward, Tess," says Johnny. "Oh, spare me your judgment," my mother interrupts. "You brought this on yourself. Everything you touch withers and dies." "Eyes forward, Tess," Johnny repeats, back of the toilet tank. We reach the bathroom. This time, it's Carl who shoves me inside. "Get the money," he says. "I got a pack full of cigarettes looking for an ashtray." I go to the toilet tank and reach around the back. I hear JJ behind me, whimpering in Troy's arms. I feel the weight of the gun in my hand. "Hurry up!" Carl starts, but then I spin toward him. At that precise moment, the hands of God descend. A tornado touches down somewhere nearby, and the house begins to shake. The foundation begins to collapse. Carl is distracted. I raise the gun and pull the trigger as the roof around us caves in. The force of the gunshot and the roof collapsing knocks me back. My head cracks on the toilet seat. Stars explode into my eyes. I look up. Carl is still standing in front of the collapsed wall separating us from JJ and Troy. There's a rose of blood blooming on Carl's gut. You son of a... He falls toward me as the house around us continues to give way. I am again, this time at Carl's forehead, but the second before I pull the trigger, he grabs the barrel of the gun. He wrenches it sideways and the shot goes wide. Like Johnny told me to, I climb into the bathtub as the crumbled bathroom presses down on us. The bathtub is filled with dirty water, backed up from old pipes. As I slip down its porcelain walls, I feel my mother's phantom hands reach up from beneath the water. Her rotten breath seeps into my pores. She guides me downward, hugging me close. There, Tess. Just before the bathroom collapses completely, Carl jumps into the tub on top of me. Fluid from his stomach seeps out. Cold, dirty water below. Hot, gut-shot blood from on top. My mother's rotting breath below. Carl's sour cigarette reek from above. I'm stuck in the bathtub with Carl. The storm pounds away, but amidst the chaos, somewhere on the other side of the collapsed walls, I hear the sound of JJ crying. He's alive. Later, it's me and Carl's eyeless corpse in the bathtub. My mother's ghost is in there too. Guess I was wrong about you, she says. This time at least, but you're still... Shut up, I say. Don't you ever shut up. Bloated, blue, cowering in the rotten water. You're gone, Mom, I say, and good riddance. The memory of her swirls down the drain, no longer relevant. Mercifully, finally, she's gone. Her constant threats are replaced by the sound of intensifying wind. The rubble of the house creaks like trees in a forest. I hear JJ crying again. I take a deep breath, and I begin crawling forward through one of the tunnels amidst the wreckage, forging into the timber remains of the house. Later, eyes forward, Tess. Johnny, Joe. The structure creaks with each gust of wind. The wooden plaster press into me, crushing out the air. The tunnel was small enough to begin with as the house settles and resettles. I'm crushed, but I keep fighting. Through the cracks between the rubble, I see lightning, hail. The storm, the real storm is coming, and I have to get out before it does. The tunnel is getting smaller, narrowing to a pinpoint. I've never felt this trapped. Johnny. Eyes forward, Tess. You and me now, babe. You and me and JJ. Crying. I can still hear it somewhere. Or is it just wishful thinking? Maybe Troy find the money. Maybe he. No, I can't think of that. Broken nails grind into me, shards of glass. A fissure opens up in my lower leg. Water rises through the foundation of the house too. The river at the back of the property has gone over its banks. I'm going to die the way that Carl did, the way my mother did, unless I crawl faster. The nails continue grinding in, thrashing my body, but ahead I see it, a break in the foundation, an open space on the other side. 10 feet, 10 agonizing feet. The vice of the house presses my lungs to the point of bursting, but I pull forward. A final series of cracks through my spine and I'm through. I fall into the house, and I hear JJ crying. It wasn't my imagination. I'm in the hallway outside of the bathroom. It's come down, but the structure of the house had held, and there's enough room for me to move forward. I ignore the agony in my body, and then I see Troy. He's sitting with JJ on the couch, much of the house crumbled around them. The hearth is intact. Most of the room at the front of the house is. Johnny's ghost is standing near the fireplace. I I see flashing through the front windows, through what's left of the front wall. But it's not lightning. It's red and blue. It's a sheriff's car. Hirsch Hickson's. Like he said he would. He's come for JJ and me. He's risked his life during the break in the storm to save us. When I look back to where Troy is sitting with JJ, I see that Troy is looking at me. In one hand, he holds a knife, its gleaming tip inches from JJ's head. With his other hand, he holds a finger to his lips, warning me to be quiet, but the wind would drown out any warnings that I managed to give Hirsch regardless. Troy stands up and he leaves JJ on the couch. I crawl on hands and knees over to my son, pulling him close to me. He doesn't cry. He lets out a sigh of relief. "Mama." I pull him close. "Tess." Hirsch is yelling from outside. He's running towards what is left of our house. More twisters are on the way. "Tess, are you in there?" Troy stands to the side of the front door, which somehow is still upright. I shouldn't, but I do. I scream out to Hirsch, but he can't hear me over the wind. When he gets to the collapsed front wall, I look into his eyes, and he sees me and JJ. Relief washes over him. But Troy steps between him and me, a whole head taller than Hirsch. Hirsch looks up. I hold JJ close and I watch helplessly. Troy swings the knife up from his hip. Hirsch, despite his age, steps back, but the tip sweeps across his chest and blood fans out. Hirsch stumbles over the broken wall. Laying on the ground, he reaches for his gun. Troy's knife swings down again. Hirsch leaves his gun. He reaches up and stops the knife before it sinks into his chest. They're 10 feet from JJ and me. Thunder rolls over the sound of their struggle for life. "Run, Tess." Johnny's ghost, standing near us, watching helplessly as Hirsch does his best to fight from his back. "Run." Hirsch, he's losing. Troy brings the knife down and it sinks in. I hear the whoosh of Hirsch's punctured lungs over the sound of the wind. And so I run. I pick up JJ and I run. I climb over the remains of the front wall, thinking only of the barn and the storm cellar near it. I look over my shoulder. Hirsch looks up. His eyes. He's pleading with me to go as well. Troy's knife rises and falls, sinking into Hirsch's chest and face. He sees me going. He leaves Hirsch, who's dead already, his blank eyes staring up at the furious sky. Twisters rip down from heaven around us. Hail pounds my face. I slog through the flooding yard. I'm carrying JJ. He's too heavy. The wind threatens to rip him from my grasp. I'm going at a slow jog, at best. Behind me, I feel Troy's massive presence. He grabs my shirt. JJ and I fall to the ground, and the knife whistles through the air an inch above my head. I look up into Troy's eyes. Anger, loss. The money is no longer the issue. He wants to skin me and JJ for what Johnny did to his brother. "The storm cellar," says Johnny's ghost. "The Alamo." I dodge another swing of the knife and I run for it. I run as fast as I can. Neighboring houses are obliterated. A barn explodes into a cloud of splinters. God's wrath descends on this wretched strip of land. But I feel JJ's warmth against me, and I fight onward. And I hear Troy yelling behind me, gaining on me, losing his footing and spitting and cursing and swinging his meat cleaver of a knife. 20 feet, the storm cellar. But the storm is holding me back. 15 feet, nothing but a wasteland in every direction. Fingertips, not the storm's this time, but Troy's. He grabs my shirt again this time, it tears away. It's sucked upward into the clouds. The storm is so close that it could swallow us. I jump for the double doors of the storm cellar. I grab the handle with my free hand. Troy lands behind me, grabbing my foot, pulling. Raising the door an inch, the updraft winds finish the job, ripping the door away. I push JJ into the cellar and he falls into the darkness. I sink my hand into the concrete. My nails split from their beds. I look back at Troy and aim for his face, and I kick as hard as I can. His jaw breaks as my foot connects. He lets go. There's a stunned look on his face, but only for a moment. A piece of a destroyed combine collides with him, cutting his body in half. The storm finishes the job, pulling each part of him upward, 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 and swallowing him whole. My feet raised from the ground. I pull harder, crushing the concrete with my fingertips. I fall into the cellar and crawl forward on my hands and knees into the darkness as lightning glows in the opening to the cellar. Morning. Tess. I recognize the voice. Tess. It's Bill Wallace, our neighbor from down the road. Here. It's all that I can muster. Bill appears in the frame of the cellar. Oh, thank God. He comes down and helps me sit up. The house is gone, he says. I thought you and JJ. JJ. I look frantically for him and then I see him. He's sitting on the floor rolling a few cans back and forth, playing by himself in the aftermath. Somehow his Coke bottle glasses are still on. Now let me help you get out of here, says Bill. Help's on the way. He helps us out of the cellar. Everything as far as I can see is a wasteland. There's nothing left. The worst one that I've ever seen, Bill says. Hirsch. He raises a hand to his mouth. Your body, Tess. Oh, good God. And when I look down, pain rushes in. I'm covered in wounds from the previous night. The Hirsch came for you, says Bill. He's dead, I said. So are the men who came here last night to hurt us. The men who came to hurt you. Strangers, I say. They showed up in the middle of the storm. They tried to kill us. But I don't say anything about why they came. I don't want to tarnish Johnny's memory. I need more time to process it myself. Tears form in Bill's eyes. He wipes them away and helps us over to what's left of the house. Nothing much except for the chimney and the hearth. Bill leads us to the front of the house. Listen, he says. Tess, I hate to do this, but I gotta mark other houses. You're safe. I don't know about the others. Go, Bill, I say. We'll be here. We're fine. He nods. Help's on the way, he reminds me. And then he leaves, navigating around the wreckage in his truck. JJ is asleep on my hip, drawn forward like a moth to a candle flame. I walk around the hearth and the chimney. The source of refuge in so many other storms. We have nothing left. Maybe our refuge lies in it now. And then it dawns on me. The chimney and the hearth. The place where we had taken refuge so many times. The thing Johnny's family treated like a sacred shrine. I walk past the broken front wall of the house, past the memory of Hirsch struggling for his life. His body is gone, swept away by the wind just like Troy's. I make my way over to the hearth. I look for clues about what the men came for. I feel inside of the chimney, but then I realize any money hidden there would have been incinerated by the fireplace. And then I notice it. A brick on the facade of the hearth, slightly out of place. JJ has fallen asleep on my shoulder. Holding him so as to not wake him, I reach for the brick, and I remove it. Deep on the other side is a large Ziploc bag, bound into a bundle of rubber bands. I take them off. The bag is filled with laundry tickets from the laundromat, the family business. Dozens of them. Near the front, I see one dated 3 days back, the day before Johnny was killed by Carl and Troy. Thompson's Laundromat, ticket number 00235. Every laundry ticket is blank. The only thing on them is the number. I had seen Johnny's mom use the machine before. She punched in a number and the conveyor belt brought the garments forward. If the laundromat is still standing, what would I find when I punched in the numbers? Carl and Troy had wanted it bad enough that they had come to our house in the middle of a storm. Something, maybe something that could help us start over. A new life for JJ and I. The memory of Hirsch. The memory of Johnny before everything fell apart. There's a piece of me that wants to leave and never look back. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hope. When it rains, it pours. Amidst the hundreds of tickets in the Ziploc bag, I sense possibility. For the first time in as long as I can remember, I see a break in the clouds. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk numbers. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, which adds up fast. But with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save on average up to 50% per session. With BetterHelp, you pay a flat fee for weekly sessions, saving you big on cost and on time. Your mental health is worth it, and now it's within reach. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. And it's convenient too. You can join a session with the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. Plus, you can switch therapists at any time. Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/MrCreeps to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/MrCreeps. A storm came through Mayberry County a little over a week ago. The rivers washed out the road, trees fell on the power lines, and most everyone hunkered down in their homes to wait for the storm to blow over. The only problem is that it never did. It's been 10 days and it's still raining. I don't know how my phone got this signal, but there's something horrible going on up here that you all need to know about. Your town could be next. I crouched down in our dingy living room, placing yet another bottle under yet another leak. Our roof leaked during normal rain already, and this storm was making it look as if somebody had thrown a hedgehog at a water balloon. At least a dozen wet spots were scattered around, each pinging down water droplets rhythmically. Dad was sitting in the glow of our furnace, a half-empty whiskey bottle still in his hand. I shot a look at the still glowing embers inside. The furnace was the one upside to being white trash, I figured. When the power goes out, we can still stay warm. A look at the few remaining logs that I had stacked up in the corner by our TV told me how much time we would have heat for. Enough for a few more days if we had the self-control to ration them. I looked back at my dad, drool dripping from the corner of his mouth. Self-control had never been one of his strong suits. The forest outside was lit up by a flash of lightning, and I braced myself. Less than a second later, the house was rocked by thunder that shook the glass in the windows and pounded the front door. It took me a second to realize that the pounding on the front door hadn't stopped even after the rumbling thunder had died away. I went to the door and I pulled it open. Luna Snyder stood on my front porch wearing a backpack and a raincoat, her blonde hair pulled into a ponytail that dripped water. I let her in and shut the door behind us. She shot a look at Dad's comatose figure, and then looked at me with a raised eyebrow. "Still?" she asked. "Yeah, I know," I said. "How's your mom doing?" Luna walked up to the sink and wrung her ponytail out into it. "Oh, still got her hands full. A tree fell on the Dawson's place while they were sleeping. The only one who died was their dog, but the rest of them got hurt pretty bad. She's doing what she can." I shot a look at the trees surrounding my house. If one of those fell in on us, there would be nothing left but a hole that smelled of booze and mold. It was early evening, but the clouds were so thick that I would have believed you if you told me it was midnight. The trees whipped back and forth, almost advertising their destructive weight. I fought down a shudder and looked away. "Listen," Luna said, pulling a note out of her backpack and handing it to me. "My mom needs some more medicine and wants an update on the town. Everything she needs we can get if we make a quick run to the pharmacy on Main Street and pass by the fire station to check on Stanley and the messages there." She shot me a sheepish grin. "So, Milton, you feel like helping me out and getting soaked again?" There was something about her face that made me almost smile, despite everything going on. I looked over the supplies written in her mom's scrawled handwriting and passed it back to her. "Yeah, just let me grab my coat and we'll get going." I threw on an old pair of rain boots and a coat, neither of which would be of much use at keeping the water out. I opened one of my high school notebooks and scrawled out a quick note to Dad about where we were going and set it on the counter. Luna stood by the door, anxious to leave. I got up to go and shot another glance at Dad, and then threw a log on the fire to keep him warm. Mom would have approved. Stepping outside was like entering a rock concert, freezer, and airsoft shooting range all mixed into one. The rain pelted us from every side, whipped into a frenzy by the wind. We continued down the street, conversation made difficult by the storm. I kept an eye on the houses on either side as we passed by. Power had gone out on the first day of the storm, and I doubted that many houses had extra food. Luna and I had talked the situation over with her mom every time I headed over to her house. None of us had any idea what kind of storm could last for this long, especially a storm as powerful as this one. Mayberry County is situated high in the mountains of West Virginia, so we're no strangers to storms. But like this, nobody had seen anything like it. After around 20 minutes of walking, we made it to Main Street. We had learned on a previous excursion that somebody had left the front door to the pharmacy unlocked, so we flipped on our flashlights and we headed inside. The beams flashed across the darkened interior, revealing a man crouched down by the checkout machines. He jumped and spun to stare at us, shielding his eyes from the light. "Hi, Mr. Harrington," Luna said, angling her light to the floor. Mr. Harrington grabbed a pill bottle sitting on the counter, slipping it into his pocket. He wiped his still wet face with the same hand he had used to grade my physics papers last semester. There was a look of pure panic in his eyes. "Luna, Milton," he stuttered. "Where are you? How?" He seemed to notice our flashlights for the first time. "Turn those things off," he hissed, waving his hands at our lights. A red line of blood trickled from a cut on the side of his neck. Luna flipped her light off, and after a short pause, I did the same, reducing Mr. Harrington to a black silhouette. I had been fearing this for a few days now. My childhood had been spent watching enough apocalypse films to know that apparently people turned into panicked animals in situations like these. I stepped forward, pulling Luna behind me and cursing myself for not bringing the pistol that my dad kept in his closet. Stupid. If he attacked us, it would be my fault. "How did you get hurt, Mr. Harrington?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. I was at the fire station. There was..." Mr. Harrington cut himself off. A flash of lightning lit up the inside of the shop. Mr. Harrington was looking away from us, instead staring into the darkness at the back of the shop. He let out a moan that was cut off by a roll of crashing thunder, and then he turned back and ran at us. I braced myself for his charge, but Mr. Harrington didn't run at me or Luna. He ran for the door, sprinting out into the rain. I let out a low sigh and sat down hard on the linoleum, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, making my knees weak. Water dripped off the end of my nose onto the speckled white and black floor. Luna flipped her light back on, staring into the black of the store. "Did you hear what he said about the fire station?" I reached out and flipped my own light back on. Yeah, maybe he had tried attacking it and Stanley fought him off. I don't really care though. Come on, let's grab your mom's stuff and get out of here. Luna nodded, unzipped her backpack, and began making her way down the aisles. I jumped over the prescription desk and pushed open the window to get to the drugs they kept back there. After a few minutes of throwing pills into bottles, we were done. We headed back into the rain, walking down Main Street towards the fire station. The fire station was one of the only places left in Mayberry County that still had power. Stanley, the fire chief, ran the place. He had a network of walkie-talkies linked to several houses throughout the county. If there was an emergency, they would call out to him and he would be able to get help. With the roads out and the town isolated, it was probably the only help that anybody could expect. I reached back and grabbed Luna's hand as we made our way down Main Street. I wouldn't want to get separated, you know, I shouted over the wind. She squeezed my hand and picked up her pace. Stanley had tried making contact with the outside world, but our town was already hard-pressed to get radio signals. It was situated high in the mountains, and that meant that radio waves were blocked and bounced around too much. Add in the storm and the loss of power, that meant that we had been cut off with the outside world since the first night that the storm had rolled through. We rounded the corner to the station. I shielded my eyes from the rain with my hand, confused. The normally bright lights of the station were out. I crept forward, crunching a piece of broken glass under my boot. Shards of glass littered the sidewalk in front of the station from the shattered front doors. I looked around to see if anybody was watching us, but with the rain it was impossible to tell. I flipped on my flashlight and stepped inside. "Stanley?" I shouted. The room was lit up by a flash of lightning followed by a roar of thunder an instant later. I jumped, cursed, and dropped my flashlight. It hit the ground and rolled forward, coming to a stop by a disembodied hand laying on the floor. "No," Luna whispered under her breath. "No." I stepped forward, scooping up the light and pointing it further down the hallway. The rest of Stanley was just inside a room off the main hallway. He had been cleanly cut into a dozen or so separate pieces. Most of my mind was screaming in horror, screaming the same way Luna had begun screaming behind me. But another smaller part took in the scene with a logic so remote and detached that it disturbed me more than the body. Interesting, this part of my mind said. Why isn't there any blood? I mean, the meat's all there, but I see only a few stray drops spattering the ground. How did that happen? What kind of knife could make cuts as clean as those? I flashed my light on Stanley's map of Mayberry County hanging on the wall. In the bottom right corner of the map, he had written a legend. It said, X equals family confirmed dead. Question mark equals no contact, probably dead. Pound sign equals small number of family members at home, at risk of attack. Stanley had crossed out a dozen houses on the western border of the town and placed question marks over several more. The pound symbol was scattered around different homes, including the fire station where we were standing. It was also over my own home in the eastern portion of the town. From the darkness further in the facility, a guttural clack sounded out, followed by what sounded like somebody dragging metal over concrete. It grew louder. I spun, grabbed Luna, and ran out into the storm. Almost as if sensing our presence, it increased in volume and intensity, and I found it hard to stay on my feet with the wind and rain. The next half hour passed in a blur of rain, wind, and running. We reached Luna's place and dropped off the medicine. I'm heading back to my house now. I'm terrified, but I have no choice. He's my dad. I'll let you all know what I find when I get there. Luna and I sat in the living room as Mrs. Snyder tended to the youngest Dawson girl. The girl had a compound fracture in her ankle and was sweaty with pain. Mrs. Snyder changed her bandage and gave her one of the pills that we had gathered before laying her back down to sleep. She pulled over a chair and focused all of her attention on us to hear what had happened. Luna explained to her mom most of what we had seen, but she paused when it was time to describe the fire station. "Mrs. Snyder," I cut in. "Stanley was cut all up into little pieces, but there was no blood anywhere." The Dawson girl sat up, staring at us with eyes shot full of pain. "That's how Bernie was. I filled his bowl with dog food, but he was in the kitchen all cut up, and then the storm blew the tree down." Mrs. Snyder gently pushed her back down on the couch. "Sleep," she said. Her voice was kind but held a firm note of command. The Dawson girl fell back and closed her eyes, asleep almost immediately. We told her about the map Stanley had set up in the fire station and how it had marked my house as being at risk. "Mrs. Salinger, too," Luna said from behind me. "What?" I asked. "I looked at the map," she said almost absent-mindedly. "In this part of town there was a symbol on your house and on Mrs. Salinger's." Luna's mom looked between us, her eyes sharp. "Listen, here's what we'll do. You both go get Milton's dad and then you'll swing by Mrs. Salinger and bring them both here. We'll make room." My mind flashed back to the half-full bottle of booze that I had left in my dad's hand. My dad might not be in a state to walk, especially in this storm. Some of the sharpness in her eyes gave away, revealing pity. "Oh, fine, you'll both head to your dad's place. You'll stay the night with him until he's in a state to move. Then tomorrow morning, you'll bring him and Mrs. Salinger here." We agreed and slung our coats back on and set out through the storm. It had weakened considerably. I allowed myself a faint hope that it might finally be ending. When we reached my house, I saw that the half-empty bottle was now entirely empty. Dad was still passed out in his same stupid armchair. I walked into his closet, grabbed the 2 bottles of booze I knew that he kept there, and smashed them against the pavement of our back patio. I cursed under my breath before returning to his closet and grabbing his pistol. I knew that we might need it. Luna watched me, her expression a mix of concern and approval. I slid the pistol into my backpack inside. "Now we should probably get ready for bed." We changed into thick sweaters and sweatpants, though they did almost nothing to dull the cold. I pointed to the narrow twin bed in my bedroom. "You can sleep there. I'll pull over some comforters and sleep in the ground beside you." We lay down, the rain now faded to a patter that somehow comforted me despite everything. I stared up from the ground at the motion in the ceiling fan, unable to sleep. "You think my mom's gonna be okay?" Luna asked from above me on the bed. "Don't worry, she'll be fine. Mr. and Mrs. Dawson are there with her, and they're mostly uninjured. On top of that, your mom's the smartest person that I've ever met." I let some bitterness creep into my voice, unlike a certain drunk that I know. "I'm scared, Milton." "Yeah, I am too." Luna cleared her throat. "You know, I wouldn't mind if you joined me. I mean, if you want." I felt my heart skip for a moment. And did she mean up on the bed? I mean, what else could she mean? I sat up, watching her for a moment to see if I had misunderstood. She lifted her thick comforter and I crawled underneath it, pulling another blanket to double layer on top of us. Luna wrapped her arms around me, burying her face against my chest. "You're warm," she said. "Yeah, well, you're freezing." Luna let out a muffled laugh. A moment of silence passed between us. "I'm sorry about your dad." The words cut deep and I let out a long, low sigh. "You want to know what the funny thing is?" I said. "My dad really is a good man, kind, funny, and thoughtful. It's just that booze that gets him like this. With my mom's accident, he turned into this. I haven't seen the old him in years." Another long moment of silence passed. "Well, I hope I get to meet him someday," she said. "I hope you do too." I pulled her tight and soon we were both fast asleep. I woke up, spitting out Luna's long blonde hair. The sky held the unmistakable red hue of a sunrise. Luna stirred, opened her eyes, and pulled her hair off of me with a sheepish grin. "Hey, Milton," my dad said from the doorway. His face held the same pinched expression it always had when he was hungover. "Do you know what happened to the booze in my—" He noticed Luna. "Oh, hi, Luna." Luna froze, her face colored bright red. She shot upright and bent over in a half-nod, half-bow. Hi, Mr. Maves. This isn't what it looks." She trailed off, as if realizing nothing she could say would improve our situation. After the initial awkwardness passed, we explained to him what we had seen and what our plan was. He was hesitant at first, but when he heard Luna's mom would have headache medicine, he agreed. We ate what little food remained at my house for breakfast and set off towards Mrs. Salinger's place. The rain dripped down from the leaves above us, now no stronger than an average afternoon rainstorm. Hope that it might actually be over surged in my gut as we reached the house. "Mrs. Salinger," I said as I ran up the steps, only realizing at the last moment that the door was swinging open on its hinges. I paused on the front porch, looking into the house. A black silhouette was standing in the living room. It looked to be around 6 feet tall, and my eyes were drawn to where it had 2 hooked blades on the ends of its arms instead of hands. One hook of the creature held what looked like a piece of Mrs. Salinger's foot. It made a horrific slurp as it sucked on the stump. Luna ran up the stairs beside me. "Milton," but then she saw it. It rose up to its full height, turning to face us and letting out the same guttural clack that we had heard in the fire station. We turned and ran down the steps, grabbing my dad as we passed him. The storm kicked up immediately, from a simple patter to a full-blown tempest. Wind whipped from every side, but we kept running. After just a few seconds, trees began to topple around us. We fell to the ground and cowered as the wind, rain, and hail all battered us. After what seemed like an eternity, it died down a little. I shot a glance around, half expecting to see the black silhouette leaning over us, but it was nowhere to be seen. We made it back to Luna's place and had a minor breakdown. Mrs. Snyder listened to our hysterics with rapt attention and silence. When we were done, she handed each of us a banana and told us to eat. "Listen," she said, "here's what I figure. That thing must be vulnerable, otherwise, why would it need the storm?" She looked at me. "You brought that gun, right?" I pulled it from my bag and set it on the table. "Good." She sat back, rubbing her eyes. A part of my mind wondered how much sleep she had been getting for the past week. Finally, she sat forward again. We'll figure something out, but for now we should probably eat those peels. They're edible and we're just about out of food." I stared out through the window at the waves of water that were somehow still pouring down before turning back into the living room. Luna Snyder knelt down next to a couch, wiping Joe's forehead with a cool rag. I knelt down beside Luna, watching Joe's face. She was sleeping, thankfully. The poor girl's broken leg was infected. She had spent most of the past 12 hours in a feverish haze. Luna reached out and grabbed my hand. I squeezed it, not knowing what to say. My stomach ached with hunger. Mrs. Snyder stuck her head into the living room. "Luna, Milton, come with me." Luna shot a look at me, her expression grim. Her long blonde hair was pulled into a ponytail that was still dripping water from when we had gone out earlier that day. We were both only 18, far too young to be expected to know what to do in a situation like this. We followed Luna's mom to the kitchen where my father and Mr. and Mrs. Dawson stood at the counter. "Joe doesn't have much time," Mrs. Snyder said, "but with the roads washed out, driving's off the table." She rubbed her forehead, her face bearing the same grim expression that I had seen earlier on Luna. "It'll take a day or two to reach the nearest town on foot, but I don't see another option." "We would need food," I said. "None of us have eaten a full meal in days. If we're going to be trekking through the woods, we'll need energy." "Milton and I will search for some," Luna said in a firm tone. You guys need to stay here and look after Jill." Thunder cracked and rolled outside. None of us jumped. We had all grown accustomed to it by now. Mrs. Snyder drubbed her fingers on the surface of the table, staring at her daughter with a mix of exasperation and thoughtfulness. "Fine," she said. "Don't stray too far from the house." Luna nodded. We left the conversation at the kitchen and walked to her room to prepare our clothes for the trip. "So, where are we going?" Luna asked me, sticking an arm through her rain jacket. "There's a trailer park a mile down McElroy Avenue," I said. "I would guess that the people living there probably left to search for better shelter." What I didn't tell her was that my family had lived there until I was 10. Luna already knew that I was white trash, but I still found myself trying to hide parts of my family's background. Her mom was a doctor after all. We basically came from different planets. I pulled on my worn rain jacket and laced up my boots. They would do almost nothing against the amount of rain that we were going to be walking through, but I figured I was fighting off the wind more than the rain. It was bitter cold out there, especially once you were soaking wet. I pulled on my backpack too, checking to be sure that my dad's pistol was inside. When we had gathered our things, we walked to the front door. Stepping out into the rain meant a return of the now familiar feeling of getting blasted in the face by a fire hose. The wind whipped each raindrop against any exposed skin like miniature BB pellets. The roar of the wind and crackling thunder made conversation all but impossible. I reached out and grabbed Luna's hand, in part to keep from getting separated in the darkness, in part because something about being out in the wind and rain was flooding the animal part of my brain with adrenaline, and in part because I was pretty sure that I was in love with her. We had reached the trailer park a little after 6 p.m., though it was dark enough out that I would have believed you if it was much later. We started searching the trailers one by one. Someone had clearly already passed through the park. Most of the trailers had broken front doors and all were empty. I cursed under my breath. If we didn't get food, there was no way that we would make it on a multi-day journey out of town. I was so hungry that it was giving me nausea. I sat down hard on these steps leading to a trailer. Luna watched me, though it was hard to read her expression through the darkness, the rain, and the hood of her jacket. She reached out and pulled me to my feet, and then pointed off in the distance. A rundown house occupied the lot next to the trailer park, reminding me of my own house in a way. A few rusted-out cars languished in the tall grass on the front lawn. Luna pointed to it again, shouting something that was lost in the rain and wind. I nodded and we both set off towards it. I inspected the ground, allowing myself to feel hope when I didn't spot any footprints in the mud. Maybe we would actually find some food in this guy's place. After shouting uselessly at the house from the front yard, we moved closer. There was almost no chance that the guy was actually going to be able to hear us over the downpour. I ran up the front steps and pounded on the front door. When there was no response, I tried the handle. The door swung open, revealing a dark and empty house. "Hello," I called out, taking a few cautious steps inside. When I heard no response once again, I called Luna up to join me. We walked into the kitchen and pulled open the cupboards. There, high up on a shelf, were several cans of food. Ravioli, chili, even a few cans of baked beans. I let out a gasp of happiness and grabbed a spoon from the drawer and dug into the can of ravioli. After a few bites, I passed it to Luna, who finished the rest. We took turns scraping the inside of the can with the spoon until it was clean. I've eaten some delicious food in my life, fresh salmon, venison, my mom's spaghetti with white sauce. But nothing, and I mean nothing, has ever been half as tasty as that cold can of ravioli that I shared with Luna. We got to our feet and stuffed the rest of the cans into my backpack. I turned to look at Luna, fighting back a bark of laughter that was bubbling out of me. Luna was clearly fighting back a grin too. You've got some sauce," I said, pointing to the corner of her mouth. "How embarrassing," she said, licking it away. I'm never gonna be able to, she trailed off, looking out towards the front of the house. I turned to follow her gaze. The still open front door gave a view of the rusted out cars. One of the black figures stood in the front yard, half obscured by the falling rain. It's one of those things, I whispered. Should we try to shoot at? But Luna cut me off with a hand on my shoulder. We crept closer to the front door. The figure was thin and tall, nearly 7 feet, judging by the height of a nearby rusted truck chassis. It was all black and had 2 of the same hooks on the ends of its hands. And then 2 additional black figures emerged from behind a nearby car. I can't explain exactly what it was, but something about them was triggering every fight or flight instinct in my brain. I backed away, accidentally hitting something with my elbow. The now empty can of ravioli fell off the counter and hit the ground with a clatter. I looked down at it in horror, only moving when Luna grabbed my hand. We ran down the hallway towards a bedroom. Luna slid open a closet and shoved me inside before running to a nearby window and sliding it open. I fumbled around in my bag to pull out the pistol while she ran back to the closet and jumped inside beside me. She slid the door shut with a grim expression. Why did you? Luna put her finger over her mouth. The rain, which had already been coming down hard, suddenly picked up and became deafening. Thunder crackled and rumbled over the house constantly. It was as if the storm itself knew that we were inside the house. We sat in the darkness, watching these slants of light from the bedroom. When one of the dark figures entered the bedroom, it took everything that I had to not shoot at it immediately. I bit the inside of my cheek and watched and waited. The black figure made a guttural clack sound. Another creature joined him in the room and then they left it behind. The storm died down to its usual patter, but we stayed in the closet for at least another hour. When I finally pushed open the closet door, it was to a truly darkened house. The wind and rain from the open window had soaked the inside of the man's bedroom. Luna and I stared at each other for a moment and then she hugged me. I held her tight, trying to calm us both as her small frame began shaking. We stayed locked like that for a few minutes. Hey, that was smart opening the window, I said. It made them think that we ran off that way. When we eventually separated, I turned to look at the ground where the black figure had been standing. Interesting, I heard myself say. What's interesting? Luna asked, rubbing at her face. The storm kicked up while those things were nearby again. Luna watched me with dark eyes. Hey, we can think about it later. For now, we gotta get back to my mom. Yeah, okay, I said, tightening my backpack. We set off again through the rain. The first few minutes passed without incident, but then the rain began to pick up. It rained harder and the wind blew faster and the thunder cracked the sky more often. I grabbed Luna's hand and began running down the road with the pistol clenched in my right hand. The storm continued to get worse, flooding my body with adrenaline. I kept looking around trying to spot the black figures, but instead I saw a church building nearby with what looked like, impossibly, a light. I turned and ran towards the light as the storm continued to intensify. I half expected to get hooked by a tall, thin figure at any moment. I kept running. The only thing visible to my rain-blind eyes was the light from the inside of the church. We finally made it. We stood in front of the church, the light and 2 men pointing rifles at us. Please, I said, they're right behind us. One of the men walked towards me, snatched the pistol out of my hand, and then motioned for us to enter the doorway behind him. Somehow impossibly, the inside of the church was lit by emergency lighting. We passed by several Sunday school classrooms that had been converted into sleeping quarters. The 2 men led us to a balding man in his early 50s. Bishop, one of the men said, handing my pistol over to him. We found these 2 outside carrying this. And you left your door unguarded, he asked. Go back. The guard nodded and jogged back the way that he had come. The man that he called Bishop looked us over, his face softening slightly. "Who are you two?" "I'm Luna, and this is my brother Milton. There was something chasing us outside." I wasn't sure why she was lying about being my sister, but I stayed silent. I had long since figured out that Luna generally knew what she was doing. Bishop's face hardened. He called over a nearby woman and whispered something into her ear before looking back at us. "Yeah, we've seen them too. They're probably still nearby, which means leaving would be a death sentence." He looked at both of us over again with piercing eyes. "You're welcome to spend the night here." "Thank you, we appreciate the offer," I said. Bishop racked the slide of my dad's pistol and ejected the magazine, inspecting it. "This will be returned to you when you leave." He looked down the hallway of the church and called over a dark-haired woman. "Honey, can you show these two a spot to sleep?" The woman nodded and motioned for us to follow her. She led us to an interior basketball court where, to my shock, nearly 100 people had set up cots, sleeping bags, and air mattresses. The woman led us to a spot on the ground. "We're out of pads and air mattresses," she said. "You can find plenty of blankets along the back wall, though." I thanked the woman and left to grab an armful of blankets. Luna took them from me and arranged them into a makeshift bed. I stripped off my wet raincoat, boots, and socks before lying down on a pile of blankets beside her. We talked quietly for a few minutes about small things as the adrenaline slowly faded from my body. The sudden change in tone from fear and tension to safety, peace, and security was giving me whiplash. The only thing that kept it from feeling like a dream was the constant patter of rain on the roof overhead, and the occasional crack of thunder that shook the building. "Quiet time," a man's voice announced, and the lights in the room switched off. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "I'm thinking that these people have guards on all the entrances at all times, and I'm thinking that we left my mom without any protection." "Yeah," I said, flipping over to stare up at the now dark ceiling. "That's a problem for tomorrow, though," I said. "The sun will come up tomorrow, bet your bottom dollar there'll be sun." Luna gave a groan. "That's the thing, Milton. I haven't seen the sun in weeks." "Tomorrow," I said, turning onto my side and pulling her tight. "Tomorrow." Something wet splashed the side of my head. I woke with a jerk, spinning around wildly, looking for one of the black creatures, stormwalkers the church members had started to call them. Instead, I saw Luna standing over me holding 2 cups of water and a sheepish expression. "Very funny," I said, rubbing my now damp hair. "I didn't expect your reaction to be that violent," she said, handing me one of the cups. I grunted and took a few gulps. "It's strange. We were in the middle of a more than a month-long thunderstorm, and yet we still woke up thirsty each day." I shot a look around at the gymnasium where we had spent the night. Families were talking together and a few kids were running back and forth along one of the walls. I drained the rest of the cup as a tall blonde man armed with some kind of combat rifle approached us. "Bishop wants to talk with you," he said. He looked to be in his early 20s. I got to my feet and followed him and Luna to an office where Bishop was standing over a map. The blonde man leaned against the back wall as Bishop nodded towards us. "We've talked it over," Bishop said. "We would like to invite you to stay here with us." "I appreciate the offer," I said, looking back at Luna. "But our family's still outside and we can't leave them." Bishop looked thoughtful. "I can respect that. I have a proposition for you both." He pointed down at one of these streets on the map of the town. "Here, the Marstons, a family in our congregation, decided to wait out the storm in their own home. Well, that was before we learned about the stormwalkers. I want them back here at the church. At the very least, I want to know that they're still alive." Bishop pointed out the young blonde man who had brought us from the auditorium from where he leaned against the back wall. "Jonathan here served a deployment in Iraq with the Marines. I'll send him with you when you go." Jonathan approached the table. "Bishop, I prefer to go alone. With their equipment," he trailed off, looking down at my ratty shoes and coat. I would only get slowed down. "If they tell me their family's address and you give me a map, I can bring them all back by tomorrow night." "No," Bishop said. "You know the rule. No one goes out alone, and I can't afford to send out any other guards with you." He straightened. "The three of you will check on the Marstons in your own family, and then bring them back here." He turned to look at us. "Do that, and you'll all be welcomed into our congregation." I said, looking back at Jonathan. He was watching us with a serious expression. "We'll have to talk it over," Luna said. "Of course," Bishop said. Jonathan looked up at the roof of the building as if he could see the storm through it. "Decide quickly, He shot a look at Bishop. "We don't have much time." Bishop's face paled, but he nodded and fished in a drawer for a set of keys before dismissing us with a nod. We left his office and made our way down a hallway to a deserted portion of the church. "Listen, Milton, I've been thinking," Luna said. "Oh, that sounds like a nice change of pace." I gave a half-hearted grin. "Hey, I'm still holding a cup of water if you're feeling too dry," she said, raising it threateningly. I held my hands up in surrender. "Mercy." Luna lowered the cup, sighing. "I just don't think our old plan will work. Hiking to the next town even with the food we gathered is just... Jill only has a few days before it's too late. We need a better endgame." I considered what she had said, and she was right about Jill. The Dawson girl was already feverish when we had left yesterday. "So what? You want us to take this offer and just hope they feel like spending their medical supplies on us?" I said, rubbing my forehead. "Get escorted by Captain America, a complete stranger who we've never met." Luna stared at me, a shy smile growing across her face. "I don't like the idea. I mean, how can we?" I cut myself off. "What?" "Captain America?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, served in the Marines, tall." "You're jealous, aren't you?" she said. "What? Why would I be jealous?" "I have no idea," she said. And then she set down her cup on a nearby table, reached for my face, and pulled me down to kiss me. My eyes flashed open wide, but after a moment of shock, I closed them and pulled her close. Thunder roared over the roof of the church, making us both jump. The rain that had been quietly pattering increased to a deafening roar. My heart was already racing, so I took the progression in the storm with surprising calmness. That is, until the gunshots started ringing out from the front of the church. We rushed towards the commotion as the storm continued to increase. Bishop stood in front of a utility closet, fumbling with his keys. Jonathan stood beside him, whispering urgently. 5 other men and women stood there waiting with anxious expressions. "No," Bishop said, shoving a key into the lock. The door swung open, revealing an array of guns. The gathered men and women rushed inside, grabbing shotguns and rifles. Bishop reappeared holding 2 pistols and a canvas pouch that contained a few extra magazines. He handed me back my dad's gun and pressed an unfamiliar pistol into Luna's hand. Jonathan racked his rifle. "The Stormwalkers are attacking the church from the front," he said. "If we sneak out the back, we should make it." Bishop nodded. "Go!" Jonathan unslung his rifle from his shoulder and ran towards the back. I loaded a magazine into my pistol, racked the slide, and ran after him with Luna close behind. We burst into the storm. The rain and wind deafened us. I paused to look behind just as 4 separate lightning bolts struck the roof of the church. Bits of charred roofing sprayed us as we continued to run. We continued running, only slowing down when the storm had died down a few blocks later. I pressed my fingers into a cramp on my side, breathing hard. Jonathan raised his hand and then slowed to a stop. "How?" Luna asked, also breathing hard. "How did you know that we didn't have much time? How did you know there weren't any of those creatures behind the church?" Jonathan looked away. "It doesn't matter." "It doesn't matter. It sounds like it matters a heck of a lot." Jonathan ignored her, taking a drink from a water bottle. He looked up the street and then shook his head. I'm not from this town. My family moved here while I was deployed. He looked around, and we didn't grab the map. I saw where Bishop pointed. It's a dozen miles away, more or less. It's going to take us a few hours of walking to get there. Jonathan slung his rifle back over his shoulder. He felt safe, I realized. Somehow he knew that there were no stormwalkers near here. A few hours, Jonathan said, nodding. Well, let's get started then. I stuffed my pistol into my jacket pocket but kept a hand on it. Jonathan somehow knew where they were or where they would be. And I didn't like that, not one bit. I reached out with my other hand to grab Luna's and then started walking. The rain continued to pour down. Jonathan led the way ahead of us with the rifle strapped across his back, setting a brisk pace that was leaving me out of breath. He wasn't carrying the rifle in his hands, a decision that confused me. I had seen the black creatures. They had killed a few of my friends. They were so black that the only way to see them in detail was at the edge of their silhouettes. The creatures were tall and had long, sharpened hooks instead of hands. I shuddered, pausing when Luna grabbed my hand. She said something that was lost to the pounding rain and rushing wind. I squeezed her hand anyway, and then dropped it to check that my dad's pistol was still tucked in my jacket pocket. After a few hours of walking, my boots and socks were soaked through with rain. My fingers were numb with the cold, and I was half deafened by the irregular roaring thunder overhead. But we had finally reached the end of Luna Street. Jonathan turned around and gestured us closer. You two go and get your family. I'll go check on the Marstons further down. I'll be back here in an hour or two. I don't think so, I shouted over the rain. We're coming with you, that's what Bishop said. The wind whipped raindrops into my eyes, but it was still easy to see the annoyed expression on Jonathan's face. If we want to make it back to the chapel before nightfall, you're going to have to make sure your family's ready. I can go, Luna said. My house is another 15 minutes of walking down this road. No way, I said. What if there's one of those black creatures near her house? Jonathan shook his head. There are no stormwalkers anywhere near here. How could you know that? I asked. He stared at me, his eyes hard. I just do, she'll be fine. I turned to look at Luna and she nodded. I'll be back in an hour or two, I said. One way or another. Jonathan and I set off down the rain-flooded street, stepping over fallen branches and around the deeper piles of mud. I had questions to ask him, but the wind and rain made that all but impossible. An hour or so later, Jonathan came to a stop, then turned up a long, windy driveway that cut through some trees. I followed close behind, sweeping the trees for any black silhouettes. The driveway opened up to a clearing with a single two-story house. I breathed a sigh of relief. One way or another, that meant that we were finally getting out of the rain. We walked up the steps to the porch and I lowered the hood of my raincoat and rubbed the water from my eyes while Jonathan banged on the door. Bill, he shouted. Marge. He waited a few seconds and then banged again. When there was no response, he tried the handle. The door opened into the dark house. I pulled out the pistol from my jacket pocket. Images of the creatures flashing through my mind. Jonathan shot me a look and waved for me to put the gun away. Why? I asked. There aren't any stormwalkers nearby. I stuck the gun back into my jacket pocket but kept a hand on the butt of the pistol. We stepped inside. Jonathan flipped on the flashlight. It was still early in the afternoon, but the clouds and rain were thick enough that the inside of the house was lit by nothing more than dark blue shadows and the occasional flash of lightning. Jonathan called out into the empty house again as we stepped forward. I shut the door behind me and locked it. We were halfway through the living room when a man stepped out of the kitchen. Can I help you? He asked. Jonathan stiffened. Where are Bill and Marge? He asked. The man in the kitchen was clean-shaven, thin, and had a voice that made me think that he had to have been in his late 50s. I couldn't see his face very well, though his silhouette was outlined by the occasional flash of lightning behind him. I'm not sure who that is, he said. Well, you're standing in their house, Jonathan said, his voice hard. The man looked around at the house as if noticing it for the first time. Oh, well, I'm afraid this house was empty when I found it. I've been hunkering down here for the past few days. Jonathan looked around at the room and then nodded. I see. Well, we'll be going then. No, let me make you a cup of coffee first, the man said. I haven't talked with anyone in days. Jonathan looked back at me, his expression unreadable. All right, we'll stay for a few minutes. I want to hear if you found any signs about where the family that lived here may have gone. They both sat down in the living room, but I stayed standing. Is there a bathroom here? I asked. The man pointed down the hallway. Hey, fill the tank with that bucket of water I got in there when you're done, he said. I walked down the hall into the bathroom. It was very dark, so I pulled out a flashlight and kept it pointed at the ceiling to scatter the light. I peed for what felt like an eternity. I had been holding it all day, not wanting to go with those black creatures stalking the woods. After I flushed, I filled the tank with the nearby bucket. I stepped into the hallway, and instead of walking back to the living room where Jonathan and the man were talking, I walked further into the house towards the master bedroom. I pushed open the door with a loud creak and flicked on my flashlight. The carpet of the room was stained with thick blotches of red blood. I turned towards the bed and saw more of the dark stains covering the blankets. I flicked off my flashlight. He had killed them, or he had found them dead and he wasn't telling us. I walked towards the living room, trying to think of what to do. Jonathan and the man were both still talking. Jonathan's rifle was laying against the couch a few feet to his right. The man shot a nod in my direction and I sat down next to Jonathan. My hand was gripping my pistol tightly inside my jacket pocket. The man looked at me and his smile faltered. Is everything all right, son? He asked. I turned to Jonathan and tried to keep my voice so that only he could hear it. I think he killed them inside there. In a flash, the man jumped to his feet and pulled a pistol seemingly out of nowhere. Jonathan froze, his hand half extended towards his rifle. Hand back, he said, his voice coming in huffs. I heard that door creak. Why did you have to? He trailed off, switching the pistol back and forth between us. All right, Jonathan said, raising his hands. I kept mine inside my pockets. I see we've been trouble for you. We'll be on our way now. The man shook his head. So what? You can come back with a mob of your friends. He rubbed at his face. I was starving and they had food. They gave me some at first, but then they stopped. Our daughter is hungry, blah. He continued to switch, pointing the pistol between us. Jonathan, with his hand still raised in the air, slowly got to his feet. We're going to walk out the door now, very slowly. He looked down at me. Milton. No, the man shouted as Jonathan began to walk. No, you won't. He fired into Jonathan's side. Jonathan grunted and fell to the floor as I pulled the trigger on the pistol still inside my jacket pocket. It was hard to miss with the man standing so close to me. His arm broke with the impact of my first shot, and then most of his head fell apart with my second. I continued to fire as he fell to the floor. I pulled my hand out of my pocket. My pistol was stuck. Somehow the slide had torn the fabric and gotten caught. I knelt down next to Jonathan with shaking hands. He coughed and sat up. Oh, well, that figures, he said with a ragged breath. Didn't think I'd go out this way. The bullet hole was just below and outside of his right nipple. Dark blood was already staining his shirt. He coughed into his hand and pulled it away bloody. He stared at it with a grim expression. Lung, got me in the lung, not good. He nodded towards the corpse of the man who I had murdered just seconds before. Go grab me his pistol, would you? I ran over to the man that I had murdered, doing my best to avoid looking at the bloody ruin that remained of him. I grabbed the pistol and brought it over to Jonathan. He ejected the slide and looked at the bullets. A .22 caliber could have been worse, I suppose. I'm probably still a goner. Listen, I said, what size shoes do you wear? He looked at me with a confused expression. What does that have to do with? He shook his head. I wear size 10s. Good enough, I said. Luna's mom's a doctor. Give me your shoes. I'll need them to run there in time. Oh, is that so? The Marstons liked ATVs. Jonathan grit his teeth. Riding one of them will hurt like crazy, but it'll beat walking. There might still be one in the garage. I ran outside where I found a functional ATV. It was a struggle carrying Jonathan out there, but he managed to steady himself in the seat. I pulled my jacket's hood low over my eyes and gunned the engine out onto the street. Even with the ATV, it still took almost 20 minutes to get to Luna's house. The water was so deep in places that I thought we would be swept away or get stuck in mud. Luckily, I avoided the major problems and we made it to Mrs. Snyder's place. My dad and Mr. Dawson helped carry Jonathan inside. I grabbed his backpack and rifle from where we had stored it on the back of the ATV and walked inside where Luna was waiting. Mrs. Snyder worked quickly to make an operating room out of her kitchen table. She instructed them to drop Jonathan on top and then injected him with some kind of painkiller before removing his jacket and shirt. His bullet wound was still dripping blood, but that's not what caught my eye. What caught my eye was a large black scar on the top of his right shoulder. I would have thought it was a tattoo if it wasn't clearly a cut that separated the skin. Black tendrils stretched out from the wound underneath the skin, slowly moving as if they were trying to grasp and spread. Thunder roared outside, louder and closer than I had ever heard it before. Jonathan gasped and grabbed at Mrs. Snyder. They're close. They're outside, at least 5 or 6 of them. She injected him with another dose and he fell back into unconsciousness. I turned to look at Luna. She was staring at the black tendrils under Jonathan's skin. Dad, I said. Mr. Dawson. I held up Jonathan's rifle. Do either of you know how to use this? I turned to look out the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. I think we're going to need it. Luna held the only source of light, a single LED flashlight, as her mom continued to work on Jonathan's bullet wound. Lightning flashed outside, casting our shadows against the walls of the house. I fumbled with my dad's pistol, trying to eject the magazine to replace the bullets that I had fired earlier that day. Jonathan said there were some of those creatures outside, I said. 5 or 6 at least. Mrs. Snyder looked up from Jonathan's side with a concerned expression. He was just shot. He couldn't have known. We need to get to the storm cellar, Luna said. Mom, trust me. The thunder cracked overhead. Mrs. Snyder looked over at her daughter with a disbelieving expression that melted into a tense expression of focus. The backyard was visible through the sliding glass door in the kitchen, lit up by another flash of lightning, and then another. A tall black figure stood in the grass, silhouetted by the blue blinding light of the lightning strike. Mrs. Snyder turned and began barking orders. Bill, grab that rifle and keep it pointed at the back door. Milton, you and Luna go into the front room and grab Jill. Luna and I ran down the hallway towards the living room where Jill was sleeping. The storm intensified outside, the same way it had when the church had been attacked. We reached Jill where she lay on the couch. The living room had 2 windows, both long since boarded up from the outside. With the next flash of lightning, I saw that one of the wooden boards had been removed. The sound of breaking glass mixed in the space between thunderclaps, and a black hook extended through these slats during the next flash of light. I took a wild shot that splintered a nearby piece of wood. The young Dawson girl was still delirious, so I handed Luna the pistol and threw her over my shoulder. When we reached the kitchen, Mr. Dawson was pointing the rifle at the sliding glass door. He had turned on a flashlight attached under the barrel, which meant that it was easy to see the stormwalker on the other side of the glass. His skin was glossy, almost reflective. He reached out with one hooked hand and began tugging at the door. It was locked. "Milton, move now," Luna's mom shouted. I carried Jill down the hall towards her, pausing when I heard the sound that I had been dreading. The sliding back door shattered into pieces. I turned to look back in horror. Mr. Dawson, Jill's father, was standing his ground as these 7-foot-tall creatures stepped into the house. He fired twice, striking it in the chest. The figure collapsed in a heap, still illuminated by the light coming from Mr. Dawson's gun. Mr. Dawson fired once more into the corpse of the creature. Mrs. Snyder shouted for me to run, but I couldn't pull my eyes away from it. The light from the rifle jerked, and I looked up at Mr. Dawson, confused. Another flash of lightning revealed a black hook extending through his chest. His rifle clattered to the floor. I turned and followed the group towards a set of slanted wooden doors. They led down into a damp concrete cellar that smelled of mold and dripped water. Not surprising, some distant part of me thought. It had been raining for a month. Luna shut the wooden doors and then took a step back. I set Jill down near her mother and then returned to Luna's side. She shoved the pistol back into my hands and then held the flashlight with 2 shaking hands. I turned my attention to these slanted doors at the top of the steps. "Are there any other entrances to this room?" I asked. Luna shook her head. Each second passed like hours, marked by the rhythmic drip of raindrops down into the cellar. When I shot a look back, all that I saw was blackness. The only source of light was the narrow white beam held in Luna's hand. The beam still pointed at the cellar door. One of the doors began to creak open. I fired through the wood, the explosion of the gun deafening us in the small room more than any blast of thunder. And then the storm truly began. The wind howled, the thunder increased, and the rain poured down. I wondered briefly if this is how the people in Noah's time felt. The flood, the storm that never stopped. Judgment Day. The storm continued to pick up, howling like a freight train overhead until, with a sound like the splintering of 100 fallen trees, the house collapsed on top of the room. The concrete cellar protected us from most of the debris, but that sound was unmistakable. After the collapse, the storm subsided. Luna and I stayed aiming at the door for the next half hour or so, but eventually gave it up, figuring the stormwalkers must have either given up or figured that we had died in the collapse. I walked back to the others. Mrs. Dawson cradled Jill, weeping softly about her husband. I shrugged off my raincoat and laid it on the floor for the still delirious Jill to lie on. I trailed off, not knowing what to say. I barely even knew them. Instead, I gave them space, heading back towards the door. Luna and her mom walked up to me and sat down a few minutes later. "Are they still out there?" Luna asked softly. "We should ask Jonathan," I said. Mrs. Snyder shook her head, the motion only barely visible in the reflected light of the flashlight. "I injected him with midazolam before I started working on him. He'll be out of it for another few hours at least." Luna reached out and picked up the flashlight, aiming it back towards Jonathan. The bright white LED flashlight illuminated his figure. He wasn't on his back as I had expected. He was on his feet and walking towards us. The black tendrils under his skin that I had seen earlier were still visible through his pale skin, and they had spread. His entire right side was black now. The tendrils reached up to his face where they were visibly wrapped around his eye, which was now pure black. Luna panned the light down towards Jonathan's right hand. It was bent and twisted with black bones peeking through the skin. Ragged chunks of skin hung off bones which had somehow fused together in a jagged hooked formation. I jumped to my feet as Jonathan continued to walk towards us. "Jonathan," I called out. "Jonathan, please stay where you are." He made no reaction whatsoever other than to continue his methodical plodding towards us. Images of the man that I had killed earlier that day flooded my mind. The way his arm had shattered from my first shot, the way that his face had deformed with my second. My hand began shaking violently. "Please, Jonathan, please just sit down." Luna took the pistol from my hand. She pointed it alongside the flashlight at Jonathan. He brought his jagged, black hand back for a strike. Most of his head exploded backwards in a shower of black. I couldn't hear anything for another few long minutes. When it finally returned to me, all I heard was the sound of sobs from Mrs. Dawson in the rain. I called my dad over. He had been cowering somewhere nearby the entire time. Together we shoved the doors open. They had been interior doors that morning, but this time we shoved a layer of wooden drywall off them and stepped directly into the storm. I thought I knew what it was like to be wet. I have been underwater, for example, jumped in a pool, stepped in a puddle with old shoes. I even fell in a frozen lake once. But having wet socks is not wet. Even being underwater was not wet. Nearing the end of that march towards the church, I learned what wet was. I carried the young Dawson girl on my back, leading the 4 others, my dad, Luna, Mrs. Snyder, and Mrs. Dawson towards the church. Every motion released another torrent of water from my sweater like a sponge being gripped too tightly. I was cold, hungry, and too wet to be truly afraid that our small party would be attacked by the stormwalkers. Besides, keeping an eye out for them was Luna's job. The ruins of Luna's house had offered us no protection, so our little caravan decided to make the hour-long trek through the rain and hail, our spirits only rising when we had reached the street where the church lay. The bishop had seemed like a reasonable man, so I was hopeful that we would be able to convince them to allow us to stay with their congregation. My little flower of hope continued to bloom until I caught a glimpse of the church through the trees. 3/4 of the roof had collapsed, leaving what little remained of the structure in darkness. We stood there in the pouring rain, staring at the wreckage of our last hope. A curse bubbled to my lips and I gave a low groan. Luna didn't respond, instead walking forward towards the shelter provided by what remained of the roof. I followed her, setting Joe down onto the ground beneath the overhang. Luna disappeared into the wreckage. I let her go, too tired to voice a complaint. She re-emerged a few minutes later with a pained expression. "Mom, someone inside needs your help." Mrs. Snyder looked up from where she slumped against the wall, her face gaunt. I wondered when the last time she ate was. I walked over and helped her up, and then the 3 of us walked into the collapsed building. Jagged pipes crisscrossed the hallway over dust-strewn carpet. At the end of the cramped passageway, we found a man in his late 60s, with a bushy beard propped up against the wall. A 4-foot-long piece of metal rebar poked through his lower abdomen. He looked up as we approached. I thought that I recognized him from our stay at the church earlier, but I didn't know his name. Mrs. Snyder knelt down. "What's your name?" "Jacob," he said. "What happened to you, Jacob?" she asked, pulling out a pair of scissors from her bag. She began cutting away at his shirt near the wound. "They attacked. Those creatures. We held them off at the doors, but the storm got worse. Worse than I had ever seen it. The wind brought down the walls and the roof." He gave a wet cough. "Like I told the girl, I know that I'm a goner." Mrs. Snyder didn't respond, probing the wound with her fingers. After a long moment, she sat back. "I'm sorry. This rebar almost certainly punctured your lower bowel. I'd only be able to fix it with an entire surgery team, and even then your chances wouldn't be great." The man grunted again. I pulled out my bottle of water and I passed it to him. He drained it and then pressed the cool metal against his forehead. "Well then," he said. He shot a look at Luna, who was still staring at him. "Thanks for trying, I suppose." He gave a faint smile. "You remind me of my granddaughter." Luna continued to stare, her eyebrows knitted together. The man seemed to consider for a long moment. "Do you all have a place to stay?" he asked. "No," Mrs. Snyder said. "We don't." He nodded. I was a bit of a doomsday prepper. I built a bunker under my backyard just in case. My old lady gave me so much grief for it, rest her soul. He trailed off, staring into the distance. All that work and money, and I didn't even use it when doomsday came. Why aren't you there now? I asked. I stayed there for the first week, but it was just so boring. I've been a member of this congregation and knew they were holding out here. I figured there would be safety in numbers, and goes to show me. He shot a look at Mrs. Snyder. 56 Shinkai Street, the one with the lookout tower in the backyard. Key to the padlock is 1277. Good luck. Now go on and get out of here before they come back. And we straightened and made to leave. Wait, Luna, was it? Can I have a word in private? I shot a look at Luna, who nodded, and then I followed Mrs. Snyder down the hallway towards my dad. Luna emerged 2 minutes later, her face stony. She sat against the wall before sliding down to the ground. I walked over and sat next to her, bringing my knees against my chest. You good? I asked. He wanted me to find his gun from under the nearby rubble, so that he could end it if the pain got too bad. Did you do it? Of course, Luna said, staring down at her hands. She flexed her fingers. So what do you think about this bunker? I asked. Well, at this point, the bar's so low that we're tripping over it, she said. I'm willing to give it a try. We waited under the church for the next hour or so, gathering our energy. I filled up my water bottle from a nearby drain spout, figuring it was clean enough. The address the man had given us was only a few blocks away, but the idea of walking through the ice-cold rain again was almost enough for me to break down in tears. I turned around to look at the others, pity growing in my heart for the huddled figures. My dad and Mrs. Dawson were speaking off to the side. Jill was sleeping, huddled up in a wet blanket next to Luna's mom. Only Luna was still moving, spreading a map out across the dusty carpet to plan our path to the man's house. A wave of affection for her spread over me, suddenly cut off by a memory of Jonathan. He had died because I hadn't reached for my gun. If I had been faster, paid more attention, he might still be alive. The memory of those black tendrils spreading under his skin made me shudder. He had been infected by that thing, but it hadn't spread until he was already weak from the gunshot wound. I walked over to Luna and got down, pinning a corner of the map with my knee. We needed to plan. We set off through the rain an hour later. I hadn't realized it, but slowing down had a lot of blister on the back of my right heel to fill with fluid. It popped almost immediately, exposing the raw skin underneath. I lowered my head and pressed forward through the rain and sleet and lightning. We saw the lookout tower long before we saw the man's house. A large metal structure stretched some 50 feet into the sky. I was sure that lightning would strike it, but it never did. Maybe he had installed some kind of lightning rod to divert the positive charge. We made it to the house a few minutes later, passing through the still unlocked gate into the backyard. The only structure in the backyard aside from the tower was a 10-foot by 10-foot shed in one corner of the yard. I shot Luna a look, and then walked up to the shed. A 4-digit cylinder lock was set into the door. Luna spun the cylinders to enter the numbers and then pushed the door open. Inside the shed, we found a lawnmower, some oversized canisters of gasoline, and a massive metal door set into the concrete floor of the shed. I walked up to the door and turned the heavy handle and pulled it open. A blast of musty air hit me, old but not unpleasant. I flicked on one of our surviving flashlights and found a ladder leading down into the darkness. I'll be right back, I said, sticking the flashlight in my mouth and climbing down. I descended some 15 feet before reaching the bottom, hopeful and worried in equal measure. I stepped off the ladder and turned, my light flashing across what looked to be a living room with a large TV set into one wall. A sofa sat in the middle of the room, flanked on the right by a large lazy-boy chair. I stepped forward, marveling. It was the perfect shelter. Even in the dark, even without air circulation, we'd be able to spend at least a day or two here. Luna stepped off the ladder behind me. "Looks perfect," I said. I walked to a nearby door and opened it to reveal an actual hallway. It branched off into a bedroom and a bathroom, and at the end we spotted a half-sized doorway. We approached it and cracked it open to see a small generator and what looked to be a hot water heater. "No chance this thing works," I said. "Well, like I said, that's where the bar is. Maybe we've cleared it." Jacob had taped a note that read, "Electric start," on the side of the generator next to a button. I reached forward almost reverently, pressing the button with a thumb. It revved to life immediately. Lights throughout the bunker flashed to life, accompanied by the hum of some kind of ventilation system. I wanted to go back up to the top and bring the others down, but I couldn't. Not just yet. There was one more thing. I reached around the back of the water heater and then felt the gas hose travel into the wall. There was a chance, however slight, that he had his own propane tank. I turned the dial and then pressed the electric start. The telltale whoomph of the gas igniting was almost enough to make me weep. Hot water, we had hot water. The next half hour was better than Christmas. Luna and I helped the rest of our group down the ladder, locked the heavy door behind us, and then we began to explore. There were 100 movies in plastic sleeves in a cabinet by the TV. There was an honest-to-God thermostat on the wall, and best of all, we had found a dozen MREs, a military prepackaged meal stuffed into a cupboard. We tore into those MREs, scarfing down the macaroni, chili, and jalapeno cheese spread. Before we knew it, we had gone through 3 of them. Some part of me spoke to restraint, but another part spoke to happiness. We had gone weeks without enough food, days without security, and too many nights without sleep. When we had eaten our fill, we each took turns in the shower. Those 5 minutes under the warm water did more for my sanity than even the food. We gathered around the living room, speaking quietly with each other when Jill asked for us to play Thor Ragnarok on the TV. It was almost too much. 2 hours later, we split up to sleep. Mrs. Dawson and Luna's mom and Jill shared the bed in the bedroom, and my dad slept on a mat in the hallway. The couch was open, but Luna and I didn't even have to discuss it. We grabbed a thick blanket from the corner and snuggled into the lazy boy. Luna buried her head against my chest and I laid back, rubbing my thumb against the back of her hand. "Thanks," I said. "For what?" she asked. "You've been holding us all together. Maybe even more than your mom. Thanks." "Of course." I looked down at her, but her eyes were far away. "You thinking about Jacob?" "You did the right thing. I mean, we're safe here at least for a week or two. Safer than we've been since the beginning of all this." "I know I did the brave thing," she said, her eyes coming back into focus. "I just hope that it was the right thing." "Yeah," I said. "We're probably still screwed, Milton," she said, gesturing vaguely. "The gas or the food will only last for a few days. The rain shows no sign of stopping, and all attempts to either escape or communicate with the outside world have failed. Not to mention all the black creatures walking around bringing God's wrath down. Luna, that sounds like a problem for tomorrow, Luna, and tomorrow, Milton. Frankly, those two can go screw themselves." She looked up at me and gave a sheepish smile. I reached down and gave her a kiss. She returned it eagerly. Tonight, we were warm, well-fed, and both smelled of Jacob's overpoweringly minty shampoo. Far above us, even the loudest rolling thunder seemed muffled. I think they're watching us. I think they're judging us. I think you could type away on that cell phone all night, kid, and it won't make one lick of a difference by morning. There's nobody that can help us. Nobody that can save us. This is God's doing. You should know that, a good Catholic kid like you. God gets his due. God always gets his due. Jake from the seafood department. My friend Marcus tried to leave the store today. A 10-foot tall bear trotted out of the woods and ate him alive. He left behind a wife and a family of 5. I don't know if anybody will be able to read this story. I don't know if anybody's listening anymore, because I don't know if there's anybody still alive outside of this store. I pray that's not the case. There are a few pessimists here that seem to insist otherwise, but I pray that they're wrong. I don't even know where to begin. Emily in Seasonal told me to start from the top. I know she was being sarcastic at the time, but still, I think her advice helped. So here we go, from the top. Saturday, January 12th, 2019, 10:30. Nobody knows how to rock an impending blizzard quite like the good people of the New Jersey shore. Panic pumps its way into our small beach towns quicker than taurine in a teenager. The chain reaction of anxiety is truly a spectacle in and of itself. Armchair weathermen pop up in your Facebook feed. Locals spread gossip at their favorite hotspots. Predictions of 1 inch of precipitation quickly morph into promises of 2 and 3 feet plus. The gas station runs out of gas. The coffee stores run out of coffee. The convenience stores run out of cigarettes. You get the idea, it's chaos. And there is no better place for that anxiety to manifest than the grocery store. Hundreds of people piled into the town Costco that morning, and I unfortunately counted myself as one of them. The storm was due to arrive within the hour, but, well, I never prepared for these things. My apartment still needed food and water and most of the essentials. After days of lazy debate and flicking back and forth between the Weather Channel and Netflix, I finally settled on the fact that the delivery guy might not be able to make it to my house that night. The first flakes of snow drifted through the sky as I pulled into the Costco parking lot. A line of grouchy locals were formed outside the large metal pull-down doors. Everybody acted unpleasant. Some folks rushed their empty shopping carts to the door to get there first. Others cut off cars in the lot, honked, and gave them the finger. True Jersey spirit. But you couldn't blame them. The arrival of the white stuff only increased the urge to get home before the storm. I flashed my membership ID card at the gate, and after a 5-minute wait, I turned the corner into the store. A massive warehouse of empty shelves opened up before my eyes. It was beautifully uncoordinated chaos. Store employees waited by the doors and shouted to the bickering customers, "Welcome to Costco. Make it quick, folks. We're closing in half an hour." Lines began at the registers and dipped back towards the back of the warehouse. Sample booths were out of samples. The food court was out of food. The clothing department didn't even have jackets. Families chattered to each other nervously and skittered through the remaining goods like ants over a rotting carcass. At that moment, I finally began to grasp the seriousness of this storm. I caught a plain-dressed guy sifting through expiration dates in the bread aisle. He seemed normal enough, so when we crossed paths by the quesadilla wraps, I asked how much snow that we were expected to get. He stared at me incredulously. "Didn't you catch the news this morning? They've been watching this thing all night. We only came here because my son is diabetic." He paused, caught his breath, and examined my blank reaction. I said nothing. "Seriously, they're saying it's gonna be biblical, man. Worse than they've ever seen around here. Something about a convergence of 3 cold fronts. The perfect storm, you know what they say. It's going to be bad." A woman called out from over by the cherries, "Marcus, we gotta go. Somebody said that there's already 3 inches on the ground." People around us started to get a little nervous. A couple muttered, "Is that true? 3 inches, I heard half a foot." I cut them off. "Look, I just walked in the store, it can't be that bad. Nothing but flurries right now." As if to contradict me directly, a meek male voice cackled over the loudspeaker. Folks, it seems this storm is approaching quicker than we thought. There is approximately a half-foot of snow on the ground at the moment, and the temperature has dropped to 14 degrees in the last hour. It's time for everybody to start making their way home. And all fragments of suburban nicety and decorum evaporated in seconds. A stampede began somewhere near the registers. People pushed their carts to the exits without even paying. The workers tried to hold them off, but dozens of families slipped through the cracks and sprinted out into white wilderness behind them. Their voices called out to each other like the panicked victims of a horrible catastrophe. Children cried. Mothers screamed for their husbands to get the car. All of them did this without any proper understanding of what was actually going on. They just panicked. I still couldn't see much outside. There were just so many people. I laughed at the whirlwind of nervous bodies gathered around me. Unbelievable. I was out there only 5 minutes ago. I shouted the sentiment to Marcus and his family, but the stampede was upon us too soon. He grabbed one of his children and moved his family towards the back. "Get the girls," he shouted to his wife. "Let these animals leave." And so we did. People poured through the store and out the doors in droves. They knocked over plastic envelopes and cardboard boxes on the way, but nobody cared, they just ran. Finally, after about 15 minutes of struggle, hundreds of people exited the store into the white wilderness. At that point, I could finally see behind them. There was a foot of snow on the ground. 11 o'clock. I quickly made my way through the aisles to grab a couple of essentials. I rushed my cart up to the counter as the last few employees attempted to mop up the mess of the stampede. I asked who I could pay for my stuff, but a friendly-looking girl with a ponytail and snow-covered jacket quickly shook her head. "Just go. Go, and if you can't get out, we'll still be here." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Seriously," she mumbled. "Go look outside." I nodded and rerouted toward the exit. I looked for a security guard who might stop me and ask for a receipt, but there was nobody there. The entrance that appeared to be pushing capacity limits only a half hour ago was empty, and the gate was closed. Hello? Hey, I need to get out of here." I pushed my cart to the end of a long hallway and finally found a door propped open towards the end. Wind blew it so aggressively that I thought it might fall off the hinges. I sprinted through the exit, but my car got caught on something outside. I flipped over the cart in the dramatic tumble that left me face first in the snow. That hurt. A chorus of voices called out through the storm from somewhere in the parking lot. "Get in the car! Get in the car!" somebody screamed. "What the heck is that?" said somebody else. "Get in the car!" shouted the first voice. A flash of boxed yellow opened up in between the unyielding sheets of drifting white. An older man ran towards the passenger door of the enveloped Ford and launched himself inside. Go, it's coming!" I got up and scanned my surroundings while trying to cover my eyes. My feet sunk into the snow that went well past my ankles and halfway up my legs. The Ford skidded through the parking lot at a high speed. Their panic made my heart skip a beat, and I couldn't help but wonder why. It was only snow. I got my answer a moment later. The family car drifted its way past a row of trees on its way out of the parking lot. They skittered and nearly flipped a few times, and yet it looked like they might make it. But just as they had stopped to yield and turn right, something leaped from the tops of the trees and onto their car. It looked a lot like a lion. The teeth were the only thing that distinguished its appearance, even with the bad visibility I could see. The beast's incisors stretched well past its chin. The animal slapped a massive paw against the windshield. Nothing happened, and so it slapped at it a few more times. When it broke, I could hear the family scream again. It was all over in a matter of minutes. The animal took the mother first. The woman screamed for her husband to help her, but a massive claw cut through her neck and the next sentence began indecipherable. The father launched himself through the glass to try and fight it back, but he soon met a similar fate. The creature took the children next. I tried not to watch their tiny little snow coats covered in blood. I tried to think about saving them, but they were hundreds of feet away now. The snow stacked up to 2 feet at least, and by the time that I would have gotten there, they would have already been gone. And so I closed the door like a coward. Their screams drifted over the sounds of the storm, but I locked both the handle and the deadlock. I pushed a row of carts in front of the door, and then I walked back into the store. January 12th, 11:35 a.m. We heard screaming. I heard screaming. Was there an accident? Is everybody okay? My husband went out there. Did you see him? Well, don't just stand there. We all heard a crash. People's lives are on the line. Say something. The word vomit combination of questions, comments, and accusations came in like an avalanche the moment that I rounded the door into the store. 16 different people stared from various corners of the massive warehouse, and they looked like the war-torn survivors of some modern, materialistic apocalypse. One of them held a box of packaged peanuts like a weapon. Another was still trying to mop up the collapsed 24-pack of Mountain Dew spraying down the main aisle. None of them looked at all prepared for what I had to say next. I could not possibly answer them all at once. I couldn't even explain it to them if I tried. So, wordlessly, I gestured over my shoulder for the mob to follow as I turned around and headed back towards the door. I pointed to the endless white backdrop behind the massive metal door. Don't go out there. Somebody laughed from the back. A few people muttered to each other. An aggressive woman whom I later learned to be Marion pushed by me and tried to unlock the metal gate. No, you don't know what's out there. I'm not explaining it properly, please. She looked at me with wide eagle eyes. Marion had a voice like a whip. She looked like the type to use her words like a weapon and make absolutely no apologies for it. She snapped her response back at me like I was another hapless victim of her assured Fortune 500. What? What is out there? Some snow and my husband who could be hurt. Get out of my way, idiot. Every minute matters in an accident. Ma'am, please believe me, you don't understand. You cannot go outside right now. Wait for the authorities. Get out of my way. I did everything I could to block the exit while the rest of the crowd looked on in stunned silence. Some of them believed me. Some of them told her to stop, but none of them knew to block the other door. I glanced at it for only a moment, but Marion followed my gaze. She must have noticed the row of grocery carts awkwardly blocking the only window of white light in the dark warehouse. I tried to stop her, I tried to catch her. The rest of the group did nothing but yell. Some said to let her go, and some said to hold her. In the end, Marion moved the carts and she went outside. A group of people crowded, following her to the door and waited outside the small glass pane. One woman, a friend named Liz, tried to join Marion outside, but a few men blocked her way. I recognized one of them as Marcus, and I thanked God momentarily that one sane person was still alive. No, block her. We barely got this door closed the first time. God, she can't even walk out there. What do you reckon? 3 feet, maybe 4. Can't even see anything. She's out of my line of sight. Marion, are you okay? The group fought at the door for a little while. For a disturbing moment, it looked like Liz might win out, but I couldn't allow that to happen again. The friendly woman from the cash register, Tiffany, stood by my side and watched it all unfold. Sensing that I could no longer control the situation, I whispered to her, "They don't know what's out there. No one can go out there." Tiffany judged me with a pair of trusting blue eyes. I tried to appear honest. I tried to appear normal. She didn't know me. She could have assumed that I was crazy. Most sane people would. Even still, at that moment, Tiffany put on her best outside voice and screamed at the top of her lungs. The massive tone did not support her tiny frame, and she shook when she did it, but her endeavor probably saved a few lives. "Everyone, enough! Listen." The entire group quieted down. The struggle at the door ceased. Marcus wordlessly pushed the lock back into place. Liz lifted her massive hands off his coat and backed off. Tiffany pointed without another word. Everyone in the entire store turned their attention to me. I caught my breath. "Everyone, stop. Please listen, just listen." As if in perfect response, an odd trilling sound escalated in volume outside. It was quiet at first, barely audible above the wind. It sounded like a bird, maybe, or several birds, calling out to mate in spring. I know that sounds absurd in this setting. It certainly felt that way. Soon the trilling grew more excited and anxious. Its volume grew to an almost unignorable tone. I tried to shout out to the survivors, but nobody could hear me. And then something started to scratch. The grating of bone against metal screeched like fingernails against a blackboard. People screamed and cried as they doubled over in pain and held their ears. Liz and Marcus collided into each other and fell to the ground. One simple sound turned the whole room to chaos. And then out of nowhere, a small hole popped in through the metal gate. For a moment, I was able to see the claws outside, but only for a moment. "Get away from the door. Everybody get away from the door." The 15 remaining survivors suddenly stampeded in my direction. Turns out, they did not need much more motivation than that. Nobody should. I turned on my heel and led the group back towards the registers as the chattering grew to an unbearable level. Screams sprinkled into the background. A large object careened against the metal gate and shook it violently as we sprinted past. People shouted to each other over the din as they ran for the safety of the store. "Get inside. They can't get in. God, I hope they can't get in. What was that? Get inside. Hide, hide." A horrible ripping sound echoed in through the hole in the door, like the sensation of flesh being torn away from skin. Something was feeding. I was sure of it. Tiffany fell down by the bread aisle and nearly passed out. Marcus and an older gentleman named Kyle dropped to their knees to help her. I passed by them and tried to get the remaining folks to slow down. "Block the aisle," I shouted. "Quickly, block the aisle." Jake from Seafood quickly fell in line to help. We grabbed some bicycles and ramen boxes to block off the entrance to our aisle. It was all that we had close by. Nobody had seen the animals get inside, but still, I think it made us feel safer to be enclosed. In the end, 15 remaining survivors sat in the barricaded bread aisle, dumbfounded and defeated. The chirping died down after a little while, and then the questions began. 12 p.m. "Do you think Marion died out there? Maybe she made it to the car. I saw something big in the window, definitely something big. Yeah, I saw something too. What was that sound then? A snowdrift. Something stuck against the wall. Yeah, John, a snowdrift lifted itself up and slammed itself against the back door. It must have made those bird noises while it was at it. A bird, you think? What kind of bird on a Jersey shore? What did you see? Yes, you wide eyes, what the heck did you see out there?" They all looked at me again. The messenger. They looked like birds themselves, hungrily seeking out answers that they so desperately did not want to believe to be true. Their beady eyes focused on me like a fresh piece of meat to place their blame. I had to play along. I had to keep them away from the worst of the terror for as long as possible. I owed them that one final gift of ignorance. Or so I thought. I don't know what's out there. I still don't believe it myself. But it has killed 2 people already. So there's only one thing that we can do. Board the doors, board every single entrance, and block it with some boxes or shopping carts or whatever we can find. Make weapons, find defensive positions. Nobody goes outside. I saw something swimming next to me in the water. I don't care if you believe me. I saw its eyes. Tiffany from front end. 3:30. The snow fell for hours. We couldn't see the storm anymore. The entrances and exits to Costco were blocked for safety reasons, but we could certainly hear it. The wind and weight of the white stuff sent creaks and groans throughout the metal beam in the warehouse. Each unhappy grunt from the building's support sent a nervous rattle through our merry band of 15 remaining survivors. Costco had been good to us, but if the heat cut out or the ceiling came down, we would soon be on our own. A woman named Ellen held a bawling child and a judgmental gaze towards anybody who dared eye contact. After hours of silence, she broke the silence in the void with a voice that sounded 2 seconds close to giving in altogether. "Has anybody contacted the authorities?" A few people grumbled their responses. The store manager, Kevin, spoke up the loudest. "We tried an hour ago. No dice. Radios are down, phones are down. I think we all know why. We can't even see outside anymore. We're lucky to have power still." Ellen considered this for a moment. "Okay, I think we're all in agreement that we should not try to go outside." Ellen moved to hush her sniffling toddler. "But we need to try and contact someone. A woman is dead, and if what that boy says about the accident is true..." "It is true," I interjected angrily. "Then we should exhaust all our possibilities to let somebody know what happened here." An elderly gentleman stood up from the floor and spoke in a confidently quaking tone. "We should try the roof." Kevin moved to interject him while a few others shouted their agreement. "Mitchell, come on, nobody's going outside. It's too dangerous." He coughed a laugh. "Boy, that roof is 100 feet off the ground. Nobody would climb up there for no reason. Plus, it's probably snow-covered." "Why go up there at all?" Liz asked. "We're safe here." "Could see if the police are on the roads," Ellen offered. "Could see if the neighborhood behind us still has power. We'll get a better view of things up there." "I also don't like the way that ceiling is creaking," Kevin mused. "If we could shovel some snow off, it would lessen the chance of it caving." "It's going to be dark soon," Tiffany murmured. The group grew quiet. We all knew what that meant. I stood up. "I better do it now. I'll go. Anybody coming with me?" Not a soul volunteered. The dripping of water against the hull of our store reflected an embarrassing and awkward silence. I can't help but think of it as shameful in retrospect. Naturally, Marcus's family protested when he stood up. "Daddy, no, please." But the bright, kind man of only 35 said nothing. He just dusted off his jeans and followed me on down the back hallway. I admired him for that. And I still do, even after everything. 3:45. We had to walk for a while before we found the staircase to the roof. Mitchell led the way while Kevin and the rest stayed behind in the safety of our aisle fort. We took a few wrong turns here and there. At one point, poor old Mitch was sure that he had found it, but it ended up being the bathroom. After an endless search, finally we landed 6 feet in front of the freezing cold exit to the roof. Mitchell snapped his fingers and turned to us like two new rookie employees. "We keep a heater by the outside door. It's a fire safety thing or something. Kevin got dinged for it years ago with the town inspector. Been paranoid about it ever since. Anyway, I thought that heat should lessen the snow and ice enough to let you guys out." Marcus nodded, approached the door, and pushed with all of his might. "It's a pull, son." He coughed and stepped back. "Good luck out there. I mean it." I laughed and pulled open the door. A river of cold water entered the building. "Crap, it must be melting," I shouted while climbing over the ice blocks that led outside. "That heater still works." Marcus soon joined me. In an instant, we were over the frost covering the door entrance and into the freedom of open space on the roof. The dipping sun looked beautiful against a pristine blanket of white. I tried to run forward, but my feet sank in the still, deep snow. I tripped and fell on my face, just like Marianne. "We should be able to flag anybody down from here," Marcus shouted. "We can even get some of this stuff off the roof." He brandished a shovel over his head like a victory torch. I laughed. "We're not out of the woods yet. Can't even see our cars still." I pointed to the parking lot and the location of the accident. "Those people crashed over there." I pointed again to where the highway should be. "And look, nobody on the roads, and just like I thought." Marcus nodded as an audible thud erupted behind our backs. "No way!" My new friend turned and sprinted towards the door. "Mitchell, you!" Marcus screamed. "I knew that dude was shady. Mitchell, open the door, open the door!" Nobody answered. "Mitchell, what the heck, dude? There's 4 feet of snow out here, let us in." Nobody answered. "Is he really gonna?" I started. Marcus finished. "Yeah, he's gonna. That dude didn't like me from the beginning. I saw him looking at me and muttering under his breath. I saw him look at my wife. Probably locked the door and ran off to go creep." He tried to catch his breath, and then Marcus did something that he would never live to regret. He went to toss the shovel off the roof. Call it a release of pent-up frustration, or a childish tantrum, or just a righteously pissed-off guy frustrated with his newfound lack of options. Regardless, he caught himself before he did it. He had the maturity to realize that it was stupid. But when he went to throw, Marcus slipped on the slick ice and lost his footing. The snow on the ground was still stacked up so high that it covered the safety railings. He went over the edge quicker than you would think. I ran over and I screamed. I expected to find my friend dead when I looked over the ledge. Instead, I saw that idiot sitting on his butt looking back up at me. 100 feet, yeah right. I laughed. It was so stupid and soul crushing. You just had to laugh at it. "How are we gonna get you back up?" I shouted back down. "Can you make it to the entrance?" "I can try, but they're not gonna let me in," he replied. "We'll make them." I tried to find a safer way to jump down and meet him. I knew the risks in that decision. I knew what was out there. But there was no way I was going to let my only friend become just another victim. No way that I was going to watch another person die. Marcus called back up to me. "Hey, do you hear that? In the woods." I did hear it. Trees and branches gave somewhere in the forest to our right. I could see over them from my position, but I didn't want to believe what I saw. I didn't have the courage to even shout a warning to Marcus. I knew he didn't stand a chance. But when he looked up at me and called out, I think he understood. So did the bear. It never really slowed down after breaking through the tree line. Marcus tried to run away. Natural instinct says to run when a large animal approaches. Some people even say to run when faced with a brown bear. They usually only want to defend their territory. But this was no ordinary brown bear. On its hind legs, the creature stood at least 5 to 6 feet tall. I could tell because it looked taller than Marcus even from a distance. Both my friend and the bear struggled through the tall snow. For a sickeningly sweet moment, it looked like he might get away. But just as Marcus had reached the snow-covered front door, he fell to his feet. The rest is history. I watched as the bear ripped limbs and pounds of flesh from Marcus's still shaking frame. He screamed for a while. He begged for his wife or his babies, and then his mom, and then his dad. All of the pride and courage that encapsulated his entire presence had disappeared before my eyes. I watched it all while my addled mind tried to wrap itself around another poor person dying. "There's nothing I can do," I muttered. "The bear will kill me too." He couldn't hear me, of course, because his ears were being digested in the belly of the beast. I was the coward. I knew it then, and I know it now. 6:30. It was dark, so dark that it became difficult for my eyes to stay fixed to the rotting corpse of my friend, but there was nothing else to watch. The bear left and came back to pick at his remains. I could hear other animals approaching through the trees. Scavengers likely, with demonic attributes all to their own. The bear roared them off in a sound so deafening that it must have made the walls of Costco shake. And then it returned to casually ingesting the leg muscles of a good man. It was cold. So cold that the hopes of melting snow quickly evaporated into the set sun. An ominous awareness of death encompassed the parking lot and the lonely rooftop around me. The streetlights still stayed on amazingly, and that part I could not figure out. Either Costco kept up an impeccable maintenance schedule or the power lines must be winter-proofed exponentially. The door was still locked. I tried it 1,000 times before the cold covered my hand so quickly that it actually hurt for my fingers to fight with the metal. And so I sat, frostbitten, freezing, and welcoming a quiet death that looked so much more peaceful than the horror that took place a few stories down below. I could feel my heart slow down. I could feel saliva freezing at my chin. I could smell nothing now, not for hours. It would not be much longer now. First, my extremities would go, and then my heart. The cold would encompass me and freeze my body in the lifelong beauty of a scared kid of 25 who didn't want to die. And I was alright with that. At least alright with the logic of it. It was certainly better than the thought of that animal eating me alive. But just as the hollows of my mind started to turn out the last few lights and moments before the last few fiery neurons said goodnight, a white window of hope appeared somewhere to my right. Footsteps crunched steadily over snow stacked several feet high. A stranger appeared in front of my eyes. I do not know how or why. I suppose frostbite can do that to a guy. He looked no older than 45. He wore a short-sleeve office shirt, clean jeans with perfectly parted blonde hair and a blue tie. He spoke with a deep-seated boredom for the perils surrounding us in the night. "Good evening. Get up. We don't have time." "There is no God. There is no devil. Not here. There's me, and then there's him. Pontius." 6:35 p.m. I couldn't move. The cold covered me in its entirety. My feet sat encapsulated in frozen blocks of ice and sheets of fresh snow. My eyes struggled to stay open as the lashes froze together in uncomfortable closeness. My hands slumped at the end of my arm like meaningless lumps while I debated my ability to use them at all. But still, my brain screamed in defiance. I needed to get up. I knew I needed to get up, because everything about the stranger in front of me appeared to be fake. I can't explain it any other way. It was an instinctual reaction beyond the obvious reasons. Every fiber in my being felt like he didn't belong. On a roof of a Costco in the middle of a biblical storm, or even on this planet for that matter. I felt ill in his presence. I wanted to hate him, I wanted to punch him, I wanted to vomit on him. I felt like one of those cows in a pen that can sense the other cows sick. I wanted to get away from him more than anything in the world. But I just couldn't do it. The man stared casually at the carnage 50 feet below. His beady little eyes darted excitedly towards between the bare blood and various pieces of tissue and limbs discarded along the way. That body used to be Marcus, my mind reflected lazily. That bloody corpse has a family inside. When he spoke, the stranger chose his words carefully and used them patiently. There was no rush to his tone, like the way a teacher gives instructions to a student. "You know bears can climb, boy, even the big ones." I tried to laugh. The sound that came through sounded somewhere between a snort and a gasp as a fresh breeze of cold air stung my cheeks. The air felt colder as time moved on. I did not expect that to be the case. "Do you understand me? If the animal is hungry enough or angry enough, it'll climb. You're not safe here. Can you confirm that you understand?" The stranger approached me and pulled a flashlight from his pocket. "Idiot, I know that. We're locked out." I spit out through frostbitten lips. Are the police coming?" He smiled. "The police in this town are dead." He replied quickly, simply, and without hesitation. I believe everybody inside this town is dead, save for you and your friends, -1. I'm all that's left. The bear grunted and roared happily from down below our position. Could it see us? I knew nothing about bears, especially creatures this large, to suggest otherwise. What's your name? Pontius. What is it? Pontius. What, like Pontius Pilate? Precisely. A Roman name, a good name. Why? He smiled again, and I hated that smile. It made my stomach turn. Why what? Why Pontius? He considered that for a moment. Pontius brought order. I am order. My back shifted uncomfortably against the slanted roof paneling. The feeling in my fingers began to drift away. My toes felt like they could be flicked off like tiny little detachable fruits. Time slipped away in quickening seconds while this guy wasted it talking about angels and demons. I wanted to run. I wanted to get up and jump off into the bear pit if it got me away from him, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. Well, Pontius, could you bring some order to the locked door? He smiled. I can. How? Pontius walked past me. He pulled a crowbar of some sort from a knapsack on his back, and then with one swift motion, he brought it against the small glass pane. The glass shattered easily in return. I offered a hoarse cheer as he quickly returned to lift me up by the arms and into the entrance to the store. The warmth of fresh heat immediately washed over me. I could cry, it felt so good. How are you not cold? I asked, but my question was ignored. Pontius rushed over and shut the door just as warm water began to pelt my back. Hey man, who turned off the showers? I need that. Pontius snorted. The sound seemed just as foreign to him as it did to me 5 minutes before. The rain has come. It's not safe to go outside any longer. 8:30. I haven't moved. Why haven't I moved? The objects around me came into focus as my tired eyes opened and adjusted to their warm colors. A small room, a heater in the corner, electricity humming warmly behind my back, a light bulb drifting in and out of luminescence, and a hole poked through the space where the roof door window used to be. Water in the corner, water everywhere. A rush of liquid drifted in via a small crack in the bottom of the door frame and through the hole that Pontius punched earlier. My still cold toes greeted the return of feeling as a river of warm water passed over them. My ears opened up to an endless dripping, leaking and sapping that filled the building. Reality soon weighed in. I got up and stared through what used to be the window. A fork of lightning snatched its way across the sky, and seconds later, rolling thunder dipped in and out of volume menacingly. I couldn't see the snow anymore, at least not all of it. An ocean of water covered the roof. Torrents fell from up above in unending sideways sheets. Gallons rushed effortlessly over the edge to mercilessly smack the pavement 50 feet below. The bear roared somewhere in the edges of the night. The storm had changed. I couldn't have slept that long. Instincts took over. I knew my small room next to the roof could soon become a vacuum for the water, so I turned to my heel and I sprinted. I found the hallway that led me there. I found the turn to the familiar employee break room that we had passed before, and then I opened a door and suddenly I was standing over the store again. An ocean of consumer goods sat before me. Soda cans and boxes of toilet paper drifted easily through the waves. The river had a current to it. Bikes and larger objects like couches were no match for the tide. They drifted with the other junk lazily through the aisles. I tried to measure the water below me in my mind. 3 feet, maybe 4. There must be a leak down there. Suddenly, I remembered the hole in that metal pull-down door. Quietly, I began to accept the fact that my friends could have drowned. Matt, a voice screamed to my right. Get in here. A foreign shape pulled me by my collar and dragged me. I couldn't see anything anymore. Water poured in from over and behind me so feverishly that it became hard to stand or see it all. But the hint of a Jersey accent gave way to my trust. She sounded like home. We entered a room, a door slammed. I pushed the matted hair out of my eyes to find 14 survivors, wet, scared, and shaking to their bones. "Where's Marcus? Daddy?" Tiffany grabbed me by the shoulders. "Listen to me, I don't care if you believe me, but I saw something in the water. Outside before we had to climb. It was swimming beside me and I saw its eyes." She sighed. "We're not alone in this building. Not anymore. Something came inside." All you need to do is walk into the light. Panches. Picture yourself in a room no larger than the average kitchen. There are some lockers to the left. Plain white cabinets are catty-cornered to the right. A shelf holds a container of coffee K-cups. A blackboard lists a vacation schedule, and employee street clothes decorate the wet floor like some lost remnants of high school. The ceiling is a drop. It's the type that hides all kinds of secrets just a few inches above the plaster. It's leaking now. Water covers the floor at about 4 inches deep, and that number is climbing fast. A bulb flickers over your head. It's the only remaining source of light in the night. Now jam that room with more than a dozen sweating strangers and pump them full of the anxiety of an impending unnatural disaster. 9 o'clock. I had to say something to them. The remaining survivors in the room stared at me like bloodthirsty hyenas. The questions they shouted sounded a lot like that too. I had been there before, only hours before. It was so easy to forget. It felt like a millennia. "What happened to Marcus?" A familiar voice shouted from by the lockers. "What happened to Mitchell?" Somebody else called back. I couldn't move my mouth to make the words his poor widow needed to hear. Instead, I just shook my head. Marcus's wife screamed so loud that I thought the glass might break. It was enough to make the other people in the cramped room shudder and shift uncomfortably. Some actually tried to move away from her, like me with the mad cow, but there was just nowhere to go. That horrible, heart-shattering, gobsmacking scream reached down into my insides. I quickly tried to explain myself in a heap of word vomit and broken sentences, as water pounded the quickly growing puddles around us. "Mitchell, he locked the door, he locked us out." I sputtered as fast as possible. "Marcus, he fell over the edge." The room fell silent save for the poor woman's tears. I tried to make her pain swift, like taking off a band-aid, I told myself, right? "He's dead. I'm sorry." A second chilling scream filled the room. Marcus's children wrapped their arms around their sobbing mother's legs and buried their heads in the folds of her dress. 13 disappointed faces stared back at me. I stared back defiant, trying to defend myself against any further inquiries, and then I started to break down. Tiffany appeared at my side again. She was drenched from head to toe, with a tie somehow managing to hold her long hair out of her eyes. She looked beautiful then. "Where do we go?" she asked. I shook my head again. "I don't know." 9:45. The children had managed to fall asleep. A few of us propped up an old table and laid them on it side by side. We wrapped our remaining dry jackets around them. The kids took to snoring soon after. They looked like 5 little pigs in a blanket by the end. I made the joke aloud, but nobody laughed. There was more than a foot of water in the room now. It wasn't safe for anybody to lie down on the floor, but Kevin did it anyway and we didn't stop him. The rest of the adults also tried to close their eyes in whatever way they could. A majority of them huddled in the corner together for warmth and leverage. Tiffany and I agreed to take the first watch. With the way the water was rising, none of us expected that to last long. We would need to have a plan. But everybody had been running around Costco for hours fighting for their lives. They needed some rest. When it seemed quiet enough that most folks weren't listening, Tiffany sidled up beside me. "What did you see?" she whispered. I hesitated. "You tell me and I'll tell you." Jake, Ellen, and Liz soon caught wind of our conversation and quietly shuffled over. The rest of the group stayed quiet. Nobody wanted to wake up the widow. "The snow turned to rain a couple of hours ago," Tiffany murmured. "Kevin suggested that we get to higher ground anyway. Plus, we wanted to find you guys. 2 minutes later, the store got hit by a tsunami. It's gotta be a few feet deep down there now. I had to swim out. We got to the stairs just in time. All 13 of us survived thanks to Kevin." Liz and Ellen nodded enthusiastically while eyeing the exhausted, middle-aged man lying just above the water. "We think he's okay," Jake offered. "Just needs some sleep." We started on the morning shift together. I nodded, but something about the story didn't fit. "You said 13. Jake hesitated this time. "Yeah, we counted once we got in here just to be sure. Why?" "We had 16 before Marion went outside, including me. Then you lost her, me, Mitchell, and Marcus. 12. You should have had 12. They all stared ahead stupidly. "Do you see what I'm saying?" I whispered in a panic. "Where did you get another person?" We all turned our attention to the pile of human bodies huddled together in the corner. A few of them breathed steadily under the cover of garbage bags, spare clothes, and paper bags. Somebody snored by the lockers. The children stirred on the table beside them, but underneath it all, a small sound stuck out. Chewing. The next few things happened quite suddenly. Kevin slipped under the water. Jeff rushed over to help him. Marcus, his widow, was the first one sleeping to open her eyes. She looked shocked at first, like a proper lady who just sat on a piece of gum. When she screamed again, I think most people just thought that she was still upset about her husband. Nobody reacted in time. Nobody noticed the red tint to the river forming around Kevin. Nobody noticed these slight disturbances in the water. Nobody noticed one of the children missing from the table. But I did. Just before it happened, the pieces of our situation started to slide into formation. I could feel the presence in the room with us. I could smell its rot. I could hear the horrible gnashing and biting growing louder, and I could almost hear the tearing of flesh. And when an avalanche of fresh water poured in through the air vents, I could see the creatures coming inside. I wanted to save Kevin. I wanted to save everyone. I wanted to save myself too. But I didn't have time. Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which perceived him, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Even so, Amen. January 12th at 10 o'clock. Cue the hysteria. Thick ribbons of dark red blood melded in with floodwater. A dozen or more survivors struggled to stay afloat inside the cramped locker room. Some of them tried to swim away from the carnage, away from the creatures, but they didn't get far. Kevin never made it back to the surface. The children never even had a chance to scream. The widow fought with 3-foot-long leeches attached to her vocal cords, and I had to act. I had to. I remembered that the pockmarked scaffolding outside our room provided some relief from the flood. If I opened the door, I thought maybe we could evacuate the existing water in our room. "We need to open the door," I shouted breathlessly over my shoulder to anybody who would listen. "Somebody help me." But only Tiffany and Jake could follow. The three of us struggled with the jammed handle for a moment. The water made it almost impossible to open. Just as something slimy brushed against my leg, we pushed it free, and my plan worked in a beautifully chaotic fashion. An avalanche of briny water, broken bodies, and enormous leeches flew out into the open scaffolding. I wrapped my hand onto the railing. I just had to hold on. My fellow survivors did not die quietly, though. Most of them slipped over the edge screaming. Some of them bumped me in the side on their way down. I know, for instance, that Ellen was still alive before the fall. Her panicked brown eyes reached out to me hopefully just before she lost her grip. I tried to reach my hand out to help, but I had to survive. I had to survive. She dropped unceremoniously into the ocean of boxes below the scaffolding and landed with a sickening splash at the intersection of aisle 6. There was no movement and she didn't resurface, but another thick ribbon of blood confirmed my suspicion. I did not see the children go, and I thank God for that, and that alone because Jake did. Jake swore that he still heard the children crying well into the night. January 13th, 1:45 a.m. 3 survivors sat on the scaffolding above Costco. We looked and felt like a trio of waterlogged rats. We were the hopeless remnants of a catastrophe. The building appeared to be quiet. There were still the usual sounds. Rainwater dripped in through the roof. The walls creaked uneasily. The power struggled for a little while longer, but the lights gave way sometime around midnight. It was dark then, and then we could hear everything, even the things we didn't want to hear. "What now?" Tiffany asked in between frightened sobs. "What are we supposed to do now?" I shrugged despondently and pulled my cell phone from my pocket. The slick black screen seemed foreign, like a remnant of some age where things still made sense. I clicked the home button. Amazingly, it worked. "I'm going to write this down," I started. "You know what I think," Jake interrupted. "I think they're watching us. I think they're judging us. I think you could type away on that cell phone all night, kid, and it won't make one lick of difference by morning. This is God's doing." He spit lazily into the ocean below us, and then he tilted his head in the direction of the cross on my neck. I didn't even realize that I still had it. "You should know that. A good Catholic kid like you. And God gets his due. God always gets his due." It was the first thing that I typed. "What do you mean by they?" Tiffany asked. She was crying now openly. Her sobs filled the void. "Why would God want to hurt us? Why would anybody want to hurt us? I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't want to die in there. I don't want to die tonight. I'm a good person. I'm a good person." Convulsions overtook her tiny little body as she shook in place. I wrapped my arms around her shoulders and pulled her close. Her cries started to die down. "Honestly, man, the way that we treat this planet, we toss our waste in the rivers and our rivers in the crappers, and then we wonder why islands are drowning. It's past time God hits the reset button." Jake laughed at his own stupid joke. "It's past time. But he still needs us, right? There's no game without player 1 and player 2, right? You can't continue." He slammed the scaffolding in anger. "Hey, stop it, man, she's had enough." I snapped angrily. "Just walk into the light." Tiffany whispered low, so low only that I could hear it. "Just walk into the light." I wanted to ask her what she meant. I wanted to ask what she knew about the light, but the scaffolding started to shake again. The 3 of us sat up violently and gripped the railing. Somebody was walking. "Oh no," I muttered as footsteps started to reverberate somewhere on the other end. "Please God, no." We couldn't see a thing. The entire warehouse remained without light. The scaffolding continued to shake for a few moments. Jake got to his feet and stood in front of us protectively. The footsteps stopped. They paused a few yards into the black abyss ahead. "Who's there?" Jake asked. "Mitchell, if that's you, you're not welcome here, man. You know what you did. You're an animal. Stay away from us." Nobody replied. "Hey, Mitchell, I'm serious. We're armed." Jake turned back to me and shrugged. I started to say something back, but just as suddenly as they arrived, the footsteps turned into a sprint. The scaffolding shook so severely that I had to hold Tiffany just to keep her from falling over the edge. Everything happened so quickly. In seconds, these steps reached Jake. I wanted to get up to help him, but doing so would have assuredly sent Tiffany into the water. I could not see the shape in front of him. I couldn't see anything of the struggle that ensued. but I could see the axe slip into his head. Jake turned around to face us, and I'll never forget the dumbfounded expression on his face. Several inches of sharpened metal stuck out from a gaping wound right in his forehead, but the poor guy still managed to make his facial features appear surprised. I mumbled something to him. I think I told him it would be okay. I didn't know what to say. A moment later, the shape behind Jake pushed his body and it slipped on the wet floor. He flipped over the 4-foot-high railings and fell to his death in the warehouse below. Mitchell appeared in front of our eyes, and he laughed. In spite of everything, in spite of the outright murder of my friends, in spite of the horrible depravity of the things he did, in spite of this absurd storm that he could have caused, that sick man laughed. Anger bubbled inside of me like a virus. It was something about the tone of that laugh. The absolute lack of empathy set me on fire. Tiffany whispered something in my ear, but I couldn't hear anything anymore. I could see the scaffolding start to slip and dip dangerously, but it didn't register quite right. The only emotion that consumed me in that moment seemed to be my fury. I launched myself at Mitchell like a lion. In seconds, my hands were around his stubble-stained neck and my knees were up against his chest. I slammed his head into the pockmarked floor over and over again. Blood seeped out of his mouth like a leaky faucet, but the man just continued to laugh. I punched him in the face. He was old and he withered easily to my blows. I broke his teeth and then his nose, and I hit him until both of my own fists were bleeding. But Mitchell just kept laughing. "Good boy," he croaked through a cracking voice box. "Good boy, you have become chaos." I delivered one more satisfying uppercut to Mitchell's cheekbone and tossed him over the edge of the walkway like discarded trash. He landed with a very satisfying smack. And then the scaffolding started to slip. I heard Tiffany scream one last time right before she fell. I saw her hand find purchase on the railing while her body drifted like a rag doll, 20 feet higher than the tallest aisle sign. That one moment of hope reinvigorated me. I rushed over to her, dove down, and reached out to grab the falling blonde, just like I had seen in all my favorite action scenes. But our hands didn't grab perfectly. I didn't pull her up into safety and save her life. Tiffany fell from 50 feet above the ground and landed on top of the aisle marker in dairy. She died instantly. 4:30. Alone in the darkness, the monsters will surely find me, and then they will see, and I will make them see. I wrote that down shortly before the sun rose on January 13th. I thought that it might be my sign-off. The floodwater receded slowly over the hours. I couldn't see it from my spot on the remaining scaffolding, but I could hear it. The sensation seemed similar to somebody pulling the plug at the bottom of a massive tub. I wondered what horrors await once the water went away. What could be left? Extreme heat, desert-like conditions, and dried-up milk cartons. I knew that I wanted to die. I welcomed the idea more than any other possibility. My feet dangled over the edge like a child on a swing set. I knew that it could end with a jump. I just wanted to write it all down first. I only wanted someone to see. And quite suddenly a voice crackled over the loudspeaker. The man spoke with a patient drawl. He paid no mind to my impending fate. He spoke as if there were an audience of 100 shoppers listening. "Thank you for coming to Costco. This has been a test of your emergency readiness. The simulation between chaos and order is now ended. The candidate has been recognized and recorded. We kindly ask all remaining customers to proceed into the light." I don't know what happened next. I'll never know because I never wrote it down. Sometimes I remember being pushed. Sometimes I remember the fall. Sometimes I think it's just imagined. Sometimes I don't remember anything at all. What I do know is that I opened my eyes to a packed Costco shortly before closing time. Bright white light drifted in from the overhead fluorescents. The warm sounds of chattering voices and nervous laughter filled the warehouse. A man appeared in front of my eyes. He held a crying child with one hand and a package of cherries in the other. Seriously, they're saying it's going to be biblical, man. I sprinted towards the door. I can't explain my reaction then because I didn't know what just happened. My memory of the past 24 hours had been erased entirely. Even still, it was as though the fiber in my being told me to run. It was an instinctual response. Get to the door, get to the car, get home, open your phone. I sprinted towards the checkout line with groceries stuffed into my hands. I caught the familiar brunette with a ponytail at the checkout line. I thought I recognized the elderly man sweeping the floor, and the rude businesswoman yapping on her phone, but that was a faint feeling. I took heed of the store manager telling me to slow it down. I only wanted to make it into the light. But just before I walked out the doors into the white wilderness and packed parking lot in front of me, a man grabbed my arm. He looked no older than 45. He wore a short-sleeved office shirt which seemed strange in this weather, with perfect blonde hair parted down the middle. He held a stack of envelopes and he eagerly stuffed one of them into my hand. When he spoke, it was with a slow, southern drawl and a timid tone that I just couldn't quite place at the time. "Congratulations, sir. Hath made us kings and priests." I smiled. "Revelations, right? Congratulations on what?" He smiled back. "Stay safe. This next storm could be the last. The good Lord may hit reset, but he will always need a player 1 and player 2 to continue." I thanked the crazy guy, took his paper, and I drove home. There I found 20 new notes and voice messages on my phone. February 5th, 2019, 3:30. This weekend's forecast calls for snow.